Welcome back, everybody, to the stream. So, yesterday we stopped off around here. We are going to be modeling some pistons today and working out some hydraulic stuff. Then we're going to be retopologizing this arm, and we're also going to be finalizing this piece of the arm today. And what I'm going to do is just start over on it, because it's not really that big of a deal. It's a bunch of poly loop extrusions and stuff, but whenever I'm trying to place stuff on this, it always comes out a little wonky and a little sideways, you can see right here, and that's because it's already posed and I'm trying to fit pieces to it. So I'd much rather just start off from the beginning, and these blades and all this stuff I'm not going to keep anyway, since I'm going to be adding hydraulics to a lot of this stuff. So, you know, the overall shape of this is pretty much going to change anyway. So we're just going to delete all this. We're going to start off with modeling some pistons so we can get used to, or get in the flow, and then we'll start concepting this arm out. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask away. As usual, I'll be listening to some Joe Rogan podcast, and we'll be answering your questions as they come in. All right. Also, might be listening to some Gary Vee as well. Alrighty. So, let's see. Rogan. Let's see. Who do I want to listen to today? I really like his really thought-provoking ones. Yeah, I think we might listen to some.
Hey everybody, what's going on? I have
start there.
It's one of the best gyms in the world. It's amazing. Essentially on caused the end of the ice class, scattered out throughout Asia and
Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry, peer-reviewed journal by a couple of scientists from the University of Edinburgh, and they are proposing an interpretation of the Göbekli Tepe imagery. There's quite a lot of imagery on those T-shaped pillars, particularly one pillar, pillar 43 in enclosure D. And their deduction, what they take from their interpretation, of course many will disagree with them, their interpretation is that those images are speaking of the comet impact. They're speaking of a comet that hit the Earth roughly 12,900 years before our time.
And Randall, this has been something that you've been obsessed with for many, many years now. We've documented it and detailed it in many conversations that we've had on the podcast.
Yes. Now, I can't say that I'm that familiar with that article. I haven't had a chance to get into it. So
but this idea that the comet impact is what has caused the end of the Ice Age.
Well, it's so complex, but now what we do is we throw some type of an impact into the mix, and it seems to fill gaps
Pull this right up to you.
It seems to fill gaps that were, at this point, still unexplained. You know, there's varying theories between some extent of climate change and some extent of human predation that caused the extinction. And I've always felt like you can't blame it on one or the other. I think humans probably had a role, but only in the very final stages of the extinction event. And one of the scenarios would certainly suggest that there were extreme climate changes between what's called the Balling-Alarod, which was the rather gradual warming at the very end of the Pleistocene, which was then followed by the Younger Dryas, which was the return to full glacial cold, and then the end of the Younger Dryas, which is dated at about 11,600, which is considered now to be the boundary of the Holocene. Post Younger Dryas, pre-boreal it's called, would be the beginning of the Holocene. And it seems that most of the extinctions did occur between roughly 13,000 and 11,600 years ago, although the dating has a wide spread on it, so you can't pinpoint it down to a specific event. But I've always felt like that there had to be something we needed to look at that triggered the extreme climate changes that we do see at the end of the Ice Age. And to my opinion, you can't attribute that solely to Milankovitch theories, which is basically the changing solar terrestrial geometries, because they're too slow. And what we see at the end of the Ice Age were very rapid climate changes. And so one of the things that I think has been missing has been the trigger. Wallace Brecker pointed out years ago that possibly a major flood from the draining of Lake Agassiz caused an interruption of the thermohaline circulation, which is basically the circulation of the North Atlantic Ocean, and that this might have been what triggered the Younger Dryas and then also contributed to the mass extinction events. But now I think that the dating of the draining of Lake Agassiz is too late for that, and was probably a latter event within the overall melting phenomena that occurred between roughly 14,600 and about 11,000 years ago. Somewhere in there we have to fit that mass extinction event, and I definitely have thought that climate change was the dominant factor in that. But then what triggered the climate change? That always seemed to me to be something that was not ever really explained. The comet impact theory is very controversial, but the evidence has been steadily mounting now for a decade.
Including physical evidence, right? Like the core samples that show nuclear glass scattered out throughout Asia and Europe at roughly the same time period when they do the core samples?
Yes, most of it's dating to 12,800 to 13,000 years ago.
These are called impact proxies.
Yeah.
Impact proxies.
Nanodiamonds, melt glass, microspherules. These kind of things are associated with impact, not necessarily always caused by impact. So this has been part of the reason for the controversy, but it's the abundance of all of these at a particular level which leads a large group of scientists to feel that we have had a comet impact in the past.
It's the full assemblage of things that is difficult to explain by processes without invoking some type of a cosmic event.
And it also corresponds with what you believe is a period where Earth travels through a series of comets.
Well, this gets us to the ideas of the what would be called the British neo-catastrophists, Victor Klube and William Napier and a number of others that have theorized that from time to time Earth encounters the debris from a large disintegrating comet. And there's an interesting William Napier addresses this in an interesting article I can pull up here pretty soon, that possibly around 13,000 years ago, Earth may have encountered some of the debris from a disintegrating comet, which ultimately goes back to Fred Whipple, who is one of the godfathers of cometary science.
Could I just come in on that for a second? Yeah. I mean, specifically, Bill Napier, Victor Klube are identifying the remnants of this comet with the Taurid meteor stream, which is familiar, I think, to everybody. We pass through it twice a year. We see meteorites, particularly at the end of October, early November. That debris stream is still there. It still contains, according to their argument, bits of the comet. There are large objects in it, like Comet Encke, Rudnicki, Olgiato, and so on, 4 or 5 kilometers in diameter. And the suggestion is that the meteor stream has got lots of small bits of dust, but it's got some larger stuff too, and some of that stuff fell out of the meteor stream 12,800 years ago and impacted primarily the North American ice cap.
Now, Michael, when you listened to that podcast, you had some questions. You are a professional skeptic, so of course you were skeptical. What are your thoughts about all this?
Let me pull back and give a bigger picture. After the podcast, I went and got the book, Magicians of the Gods, and actually I listened to it on audio, so it's, I don't know, like 16, 18 hours of Graham reading with his wonderful British accent, which, as you know, for Americans, that elevates the quality of the argument by an order of magnitude.
Yeah, that's how they sell things in infomercials over here.
And Graham, you're a good writer. It's a very compelling story.
Thank you. You're a great skeptic.
And so I think, you know, a number of points about, in general, the idea of alternative archaeology, which is really what we're talking about here. I prefer that to pseudo-archaeology, because that's it's supposed to be a little bit of an insult. So alternative archaeology So it's good to remember that. So you have these guys on the podcast for 3 or 4 hours, and the audience listening thinks, yeah, why don't these guys get a fair hearing? I mean, it's like there's the mainstream and then there's these guys.
Right.
But there isn't just these guys. There's hundreds of alternative archaeological theories. So which one gets the play, which one gets attention, which one doesn't? And for a mainstream archaeologist who's busy in the field and trying to get grants and so on, they mostly just don't have the time to sort through all these alternative theories, because this is just one. And as we'll see in the next couple hours, there's hundreds and hundreds of things to be addressed. So that's kind of what we do. So just to rattle off a few: the lost tribes of Israel who colonized the Americas, Mormon archaeology, explanation of Native Americans, the Kensington runestones in Minnesota that the Vikings had come here, the Black Egyptian hypothesis. When I was in graduate school, this book called Black Athena was published, that the Egyptians were actually black, and that the sort of Western white male dominance of history had written them out of the past. So this was a whole alternative history, alternative archaeology. Piltdown Man, Thor Heyerdahl, in his hypothesis that the Polynesian islands were colonized by South Americans who went east to west. That's since been debunked, but that's yet another one of these things. South American archaeology, Olmec statues seem to have like African features on them, so maybe Africans went directly across to South America. So there's Eric Van Doniken, Zechariah Sitchin. Now most of these Graham rejects in his book, to your credit. So you're a good skeptic too. But for an outsider, to an anthropologist from Mars who steps into this thing cold, doesn't know anything, it's like, well, they're all alternative. Which is the right one, and how do we know? And so what the way it works in science is the default position is the skeptical position. We assume your hypothesis is not true, not just you, anybody's hypothesis, like the Kluge-Napier hypothesis. That was widely published. It was widely covered in mainstream scientific journals and popular science magazines like Scientific American. And it has not fared that well over the last decade or so. It's still around. It's still debated, but so you put it in the mainstream through peer-reviewed journals, and then you go to conferences and you have it out, and that's kind of where we end up with, well, this is what we think is probably true for now, and then all these other people out here, if they don't jump into the pool where everybody is, then there's no way for an outsider to know whether these alternative things have any validity or not, other than they make a compelling case in a popular book, yes, but what do the mainstream scientists think? So, and the problem is that so a couple of specific things, like what I call patternicity, the tendency to find meaningful patterns in random noise, the Virgin Mary on a grilled cheese sandwich or whatever. Mm-hmm. Those are fun examples, but taking pectoglyphs and then comparing them to constellations, like here we have some constellations on your roof here. It's easy in the mind's eye to find a pattern. The question is, did those people really think 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years? So this is a field called archaeoastronomy. Ed Krupp, the director of the Griffith Observatory here in LA, this is what he does. And sometimes he thinks the patterns mean something. Sometimes they're totally random. Or you take something like the pyramids, as Graham knows, there's 100 theories about the pyramids, and there's the mainstream one, and then there's all these other ones, and this is why people like the director there, he just can't deal with them all, So just as one example I used in my book, Why People Believe Weird Things, that one guy calculated that if you divide the height of the pyramid into twice the side of the base, you get the number close to pi. And then he just sort of works all these different numbers, so therefore it's cosmically significant.
Well, Richard Hoagland was like the best example of that,
yes,
right?
Hoagland.
He would find these patterns in Mars and claim that, like, if you go from this rock to half the distance, and why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. He would create these patterns.
Right. And that's okay. I mean, all scientists look for patterns. So, just take climate change. Either the Earth is getting warmer, it's not. Either it's human caused or it's not. There's a pattern in the data. You can see the pattern. The question is the pattern real? So this is why we use the term climate consensus. It's not a democracy. It's not like we voted on it and decided this is the truth. It's that independently, all these different scientists working in different fields, publishing in different journals, come to the same conclusion. So we call this consilient science or convergence of evidence science, that it's not like these guys are meeting on the weekends going, boy, we got to combat those, those crazy right-wingers with our data. They're independently coming to these conclusions. So that lifts our confidence that, yeah, there's probably something to their theory, such that there's now so much data converting to this, you'd have to deconstruct every one of those independent lines. So then you have things like what I call the problem of the residue of anomalies. In any field, there are a residue of anomalies we can't explain. So like UFOs, for example. Ufologists, and me, a skeptic, agree that 90 to 95% of all the UFO sightings are explained by natural phenomena. Venus, swamp gas, airplanes, geese, whatever. They know that. And so we're really only talking about 5%. Like, how do you explain that one right there in 1967 on June 3rd? I don't know. No one knows that one. And then from there, they build, well, that's my case. Then
right.
If you can't explain that, then I have a case. No.
Well, that's very different than what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
though, right?
how is that relevant to us here?
It's totally relevant because I think almost all of your argument is based on this residue of anomalies, what we call the God of the gaps argument. If you scientists can't explain, this particular rock right here or that particular petroglyph, then I'm going to count that toward my compilation of data to support my hypothesis of a lost civilization.
But no one is saying that the scientists can't explain it. What essentially, particularly Randall, with this series of images has shown is that what you have here is something that can be explained by rapid melting of the ice caps. And Randall, step in if you will.
Well, just...
Okay, go ahead if you want.
Well, they do say, I mean, it depends what you mean by rapid. A glacial dam that, as our geologists will tell us in a moment, that breaks, that's fairly rapid.
Mm-hmm.
Back in '96, there was a very popular book called The Noah's Flood. This was a serious book by two geologists that said it was the rapid filling up of the Black Sea that swamped over the civilizations living on the edges of this, and that's where the Noachian flood story comes from. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it was widely debated and so on, and since it hasn't fared that well. But that's fairly rapid. I mean, we're talking over the course of weeks or months or years. To a geologist, thousands of years is rapid.
Mm-hmm.
So, an impact by a comet, it happens in a couple hours or a couple of days or weeks versus a couple of months or years. What do we mean by rapid?
Okay, well, what are you saying then?
Okay.
So what are you saying about their theories in particular?
Okay, so the problem, I think, Ram, the deepest problem is much of your theory depends on negative evidence. That is, I don't accept the mainstream explanation for the pyramids, the Sphinx, the Machu Picchu, whatever.
But let's not talk about that. Let's just talk about this specific subject because it's going to take a long time just to cover
okay, all right. So I'll
asteroidal
just hit
impacts.
all right. So my final point is the falsifiability one. That is, what would it take to refute your hypothesis? Like, for me, the answer would be, like, if Göbekli Tepe turned out to be what you think it might have been, the place where advanced ancient civilization once inhabited or they used it, where are the metal tools? Where are the writing, the examples of writing?
Perhaps a decision was made not to use metal. Perhaps a decision was made that errors had taken place, that in reinventing civilization we shouldn't perhaps go down quite the same route as before. Perhaps writing isn't always an advance. Perhaps an oral tradition which records in memory, which enhances and uses the power of memory, may be a very effective way of dealing with information. We regard writing as an advance, and I can see lots of reasons why it is an advance, but if we put ourselves into the heads of ancient peoples, maybe it wasn't. I mean, there's a tradition from ancient Egypt that the god Thoth, god of wisdom, was the inventor of writing, but we have a text in which he is questioned by a pharaoh who is saying, well, actually, have you really done a good thing by introducing writing? Because then the words may roam around the world without wise advice to put them into into context, and what will happen to memory when people. So there might be a choice not to go that way.
All right, but then what do you mean by advanced? When you say there used to be a lost advanced civilization before 10,000 years ago?
Well, let's just pause here for a second, because what we know for a fact is that the carbon dating in all the area around Göbekli Tepe is somewhere around 12,000 years. Is that correct?
11,600 years ago is
so
the earliest they found so far, but a great deal of Göbekli Tepe is still underground.
Right. So at least what we know is someone built some pretty impressive structures 11,600 years ago.
7,000 years before Stonehenge.
So when that story broke, this is long before you came along with your book, it was controversial in the sense that we thought hunter-gatherers could not do something like this because to do that you need a large population with a division of labor and so forth. And so what the response to archaeologists was, well, I guess we were wrong about hunter-gatherers. Maybe they can do more stuff than we gave them credit for. So why is that not a reasonable hypothesis versus it was actually advanced, but we mean something completely different by advanced, not writing and metal and technology. We mean, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, we have a body of archaeology which goes on for decades, which is saying that megalithic sites, for example, Gigantea in Malta or Hagarim or Menidra, megalithic sites date to no older than 5,500 to 6,000 years old. Gigantea would push it close to 6,000 years old, and there are no older sites than that, and therefore the megalithic site is associated with a certain stage of Neolithic development. Then along comes Göbekli Tepe, 7,000 years older than Stonehenge, incredibly sophisticated site, very large scale. I mean, Klaus Schmidt, sadly, he's passed away. I spent 3 days working the site with him. He was very generous to me. He showed me a lot. He talked to me a lot. And he said basically 50 times as much as they've already excavated is still under the ground, that there's hundreds and hundreds of giant stone pillars that they've identified with ground-penetrating radar. He's not even sure if they're ever going to excavate them. But by all accounts, we are looking, if we take what's still under the ground into account, we're looking at the largest megalithic site that's ever been created on Earth. And it pops up 11,600 years ago with no obvious background to it. It just comes out of nowhere. Now, to me, that's rather well, that we know of. But to me, that's immediately a rather puzzling and an interesting situation. And I would be remiss as an author and an inquirer into these matters if I didn't take great interest in that. The sudden appearance 7,000 years before Stonehenge of a megalithic site that dwarfs Stonehenge, to me, that's a mystery, and it's really worth inquiring into.
To put it into perspective, that's more than 2,000 years older than what we now consider to be the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza in comparison to us to then. So between our time now in 2017 and the construction of the Great Pyramid, you're talking about 2,000 years earlier than that. I mean, that is unbelievable when you're talking about 7,000 years before what we thought people were doing.
Okay, but my point was that instead of, before we go down the road of constructing a lost civilization that was super advanced but different from our idea of advance, why not just attribute to these fully modern hunter-gatherers who had the same size brains we have and so on, that they were able to figure out and do this? We just underestimated their abilities.
But why did archaeologists tell us for so long hunter-gatherers couldn't do it, and we needed agricultural populations that could generate surpluses that could pay for the specialists?
That was the theory. But that was so now what archaeologists are saying was, I guess we were wrong about hunter-gatherers.
Well, they might be wrong about hunter-gatherers, or there might be another civilization that they had not discovered that has been unearthed by time.
Okay, but
sorry, Michael, lost civilizations are not such an extraordinary idea. I mean, nobody knew that the Indus Valley civilization existed at all until some railway work was done around Mohenjo-Daro in 1923. Suddenly, a whole civilization pops up out of the woodwork that's just never been taken into account before the 1920s. We still can't read its script. You know, the idea that we come across that another turn of the spade reveals information that causes us to reconsider not just was it hunter-gatherers or agriculturalists, but perhaps something bigger than this is involved.
Or in between
that's not such an extraordinary idea. I get it that mainstream archaeology doesn't want to go there, but that's my job to go there.
I don't think that's correct. They would be happy to go there if there's evidence for it. By what you just said, they now fully accept the Indus Valley civilizations. How did that happen if they were dogmatically closed-minded?
I don't say that they were dogmatically closed-minded about that. The evidence, the massive amount of evidence that came up with the discovery of Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Dolavira, and other such sites, it's very difficult. You have to be completely stupid to say that that's not a civilization. Göbekli Tepe is a bit more nuanced. You know, we have stone circles. We have some interesting astronomical alignments. The world's first perfectly north-south aligned building.
Maybe.
No, definitely.
Again, that's a patternicity thing. Like,
well, I'm citing Klaus Schmidt. You know.
Well, that's all right. But any of us who read back into history 10,000 years ago, what we're thinking, that they might have been thinking, that's always dangerous for anybody, not just you, all of us.
That's a good point. Who is Klaus Schmidt?
Klaus Schmidt was the original excavator of Göbekli Tepe. He was the head of the German Archaeological Institute, DIG, at Göbekli Tepe. He kindly spent 3 days showing me around the site. And really nobody's disputing the astronomical alignments of Göbekli Tepe. They weren't particularly interesting to Klaus Schmidt, but they're there.
And what is the alignment? Like, how is it established?
Well, when you have a perfectly north-south aligned structure, perfectly north-south, to true north, not magnetic north, then you are dealing with astronomy by definition. And there are other alignments of the stone circles.
True north as established today, or with the precession of the equinoxes?
True north
when you're
is
talking
always
about
true
12.
north.
Okay.
It's the rotation axis of our planet.
Okay, so it to this day, it points exactly in the same place where it was pointing.
It always points to true north. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But back to this, they don't want to go. Sure, they want to go there. They would be happy to go there. Case in point, 2 weeks ago in the journal Nature, the most prestigious scientific journal in the world, there was published an article that humans, or maybe Neanderthals, lived in San Diego area 130,000 years ago. This is an order of magnitude older than the Clovis dates.
This was the mastodon bones they found that were smashed.
Mastodon bones, yes. So here's an example of how, clearly there's not some conspiracy to keep alternative people or fringe or radical theories out. It was published in peer-reviewed, the most prestigious journal in the world. There it is. 2 weeks ago.
What happened?
Well,
hasn't there been a massive reaction to that, and lots of scathing remarks by other academics?
Yes, but that's normal. That's how science works.
Yeah.
You get pushed back. You got to have a thick skin. It's just the way it goes.
You've got to have a thick skin. That's for sure. But maybe sometimes your skin is so thick that you just can't sense anything around.
Well,
you.
of course, we don't want that either.
So what do you think is going on when you look at something like Göbekli Tepe that's covered up purposefully, right?
Yes, deliberately buried. Again, I cite Klaus Schmidt. He's the authority on this. He's the excavator. He absolutely adamantly insists that site was deliberately buried and finally covered with a hill, which is what Göbekli Tepe means in the Turkish language, pot-bellied hill.
Yeah. And you're talking about something. Give me the perspective of how large they believe it is currently, as of current.
What's excavated at the moment is on a scale of Stonehenge. What's under the ground may be as much as 50 times larger.
Jesus.
But at Göbekli Tepe, no one lived there. There's no tools. There's no.
Well, you're talking about 12,000 years old, though.
But if it's buried, there should be pottery. There's no pottery, no writing, no articles of clothing. No one lived there.
Well, you're saying nobody lived there, so why should they have pottery? Why should pottery be in the fill? Why would they go along and break some pots and stick it in the artificial
fill?
How
about something? They're trash when it's something that would indicate it's a different kind of people than what we're used to seeing in the archaeological record.
Well,
in other words,
it's just rubbish that they poured in. It's just stones and earth, buckets of it.
In other words, Graham, for you to gain support for your theory amongst mainstream archaeologists, they want to see positive evidence to overturn the old theory. In other words, the burden of proof is on the person challenging the mainstream.
I completely agree.
In every field.
But isn't there some proof that the mainstream idea of these hunters and gatherers never had anything in what the theory was that would indicate these people were capable of building something even remotely the size of Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah, to me, that's the stunning beauty of this find. It overturns our ideas of primitive hunter-gatherers that could not do this. Apparently they can.
That's one possible assessment.
That's right. So I call this, somebody else calls it, the bigotry of low expectations. It's like we had this kind of low expectations for these hunter-gatherers. Maybe we should jettison that idea. And in my own other field of the history of religion, it also threw that off because this apparently was a kind of a spiritual religious, that's the wrong word. They wouldn't have used.
Actually, nobody can know that.
That's right. So, but if it was, this is the big National Geographic article emphasized that. Maybe this is the very first religious spiritual temple ever built, because they didn't live there, so they went there for a reason.
Isn't it also possible that this is signs that civilization was more advanced 12,000 years ago than we thought?
Okay, more advanced. What do we mean by advanced?
We're talking about the ability to construct an amazing structure.
Well, okay.
How big was it? Like, how tall were these stone?
Some of them are 20 feet tall.
Yeah, but
some of them are smaller with astronomical alignments. Klaus Schmidt called it a center of innovation. He was intrigued by the way that agriculture emerges around Göbekli Tepe at the same time that Göbekli Tepe is created. I mean, he went on record with me, perhaps he's not right, but he went on record with me as saying that was the first agriculture. These were the people who invented agriculture. Now, to me, the notion that a group of hunter-gatherers wake up one morning and invent megalithic architecture, the world's largest megalithic site, and at the same moment invent agriculture, stretches credulity a bit. And I think I would prefer to propose, and I have proposed, that what we're looking at is evidence of some kind of transfer of technology, that people came into that area who had other knowledge, and that was applied, and perhaps they mobilized the local population around this site. Perhaps that's precisely why we see agriculture developing there. So perhaps that's the skill that's being passed on.
But I don't see anything particularly... Okay, the stone work is spectacular, but that's not any more advanced than a few millennium afterwards.
But you're talking about something 20 feet tall, made of stone,
but we know
by people that were hunter-gatherers?
But a couple hundred people can move multi-ton stones.
There's no mystery in moving the stones. They're still moving 20-ton stones in Indonesia today. I mean, megalithic cultures still exist.
You also know that the carving on the outside is extremely complex. It's three-dimensional carving.
Okay, but I mean,
but you know that means. But do you know what that means?
But Lascaux at 30,000 years ago has magnificent cave paintings with three-dimensional animals.
But that's painting. You know that they. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying when I say three-dimensional carvings?
Yeah, like the Venus.
No, the carvings were on the outside, meaning they didn't carve them into the rock. They carved away the rock around them, which is pretty sophisticated stuff for hunter-gatherers. And they're doing this on these 20-foot tall stone columns. I mean, it's pretty impressive stuff.
Okay, but there the assumption is that they couldn't have figured this out. We know from modern societies where, say, Australian Aborigines, in one generation, they go from stone tools to flying airplanes. The brains are quite capable of doing these amazing things.
Did they go from stone tools to flying airplanes without somebody introducing them to airplanes?
Yeah, you're actually making his argument for him.
No. It's not that much of a reach to carve stone. People have been carving stones for thousands of years.
But the entire archaeological opinion on megalithic sites for decades before this was precisely that it was beyond their ability to do that.
And now the mainstream has changed its mind about this. Or at the very least,
a little shift.
Let's pause for a moment. Let's pause for a moment. So, for sure, we all agree human beings made this.
Yes, not aliens.
Okay.
He rejects the aliens.
So the argument is not whether or not aliens made it. The argument is whether or not humans made it that were sophisticated. Well, they're clearly sophisticated enough to make this incredible structure that is some sign of some sort of civilization. I mean,
I believe so. Yeah,
it is. It's a gigantic structure.
I agree with Graham that we've again undersold who these people were. My friend Jared Diamond goes to Papua New Guinea. He talks in the opening chapter of Guns, Germs, and Steel, how smart these people are that live out there in nature and what it takes to survive. He wouldn't last an hour. From L.A., he wouldn't last an hour with his Papua New Guinean friends out there in the wild.
Well, that's just because he doesn't know how to survive, and they've been passing down the information for generation after generation.
Very smart. Okay, so it's not a problem of intelligence. And is there? Okay, so here's the other thing we don't know is that there might be lots more of these sites, and where there
are. I visited one of them, Karahan Tepe. You've got the T-shaped pillars sticking out the side of a hill in a farmer's backyard. I mean, I think we're actually at the beginning of opening up this inquiry, not at the end of it by any means.
But then why not just say we don't know? This is a spectacular mystery and leave it at that. Why write a book that says
you guys
I'm going to fill in all the gaps?
You guys on the mainstream side won't speculate and won't explore. I don't claim to be an archaeologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm an author. It's my job to offer an alternative point of view and to offer a coherently argued alternative point of view. And I must say, Göbekli Tepe strikes me as a gigantic fucking mystery, and a mystery that is worthy of exploration from a point of view that may not satisfy you?
Oh well, it does. You don't have to satisfy me.
You and your colleagues, and I certainly don't have to satisfy you or them. That's not my project.
But like your opening chapter with Schmidt, I thought I really loved the kind of conversational style you had with Schmidt in the book, where he's dialoguing, where Schmidt goes and look at this, and then he says, but what? Wait, what's that again? Now he's like a little bit like Columbo. Like, wait, I have just one more question, and the mystery kind of thickens. That's perfectly okay. That's great. I mean, that's what science is all about, is uncovering mysteries that we then have to figure out. So there's always more mysteries, but that doesn't mean that's not positive evidence in favor of a particular theory like a lost civilization. It's just we can't explain this. Full stop.
Yeah, we certainly can't explain it, and you can't explain it by saying that we underestimated hunter and gatherers either.
Well, why not? We know they made it. Whatever you want to call them.
Well, we know humans made it.
That's right. We know humans made it. So whatever you want to call them.
But why do they believe that people were only hunters and gatherers 12,000 years ago? It's because they didn't have any evidence to the contrary.
Right.
This is evidence to the contrary.
I agreed.
So you agree that there weren't hunter and gatherers?
Okay, but there's several stages in between. Just 12 people living out in the jungle by themselves versus us. There's like a whole bunch of different.
Well, I would say that Göbekli Tepe is a gigantic stage.
Well, we don't. Okay, they didn't live there, so we have to figure out where were they living and what was there. So that has to be excavated.
Well, they only excavated 10% of it, right?
And meanwale, what you're saying is that we shouldn't speculate at all, because mainstream archaeology is speculating.
No,
mainstream archaeology is speculating when saying it's definitely was hunter-gatherers who did this. That's also a speculation.
That seems more of a reach.
Okay, but not okay. They may be more than hunter-gatherers. They may have been partially settled. You can have any kind of number of states.
But what you can't apparently have is the possibility of a transfer of technology from people who were really masters of that technology already when they came in.
But where are these people? Well,
you're dealing with an incredible.
Where are their homes?
12,000 years ago, their fingerprints are there. Let's find their homes. I don't know that their homes matter. Would their homes even survive after 12,000 years?
Well, homes.
I'm not sure.
They're trash.
But what survives?
Tools. There's something.
Well, what
Screw trash and tools. We've got Göbekli Tepe. It confronts us. It challenges the mainstream model. I think it's reasonable to consider the possibility that there was something more than just hunter-gatherers involved here in creating this extraordinary place. Okay. And that's all I've done.
It seems to me that to say hunter-gatherers could build this, wouldn't be opposed to the idea that they're hunting and gathering, but it does certainly imply a lot of leisure time.
Yes.
A lot of leisure time.
Well, we know hunter-gatherers. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It was like...
Well, again, if we place this back, particularly within that climate zone at 11,006 to 12,000, 13,000 years ago, whatever it turns out to be, we're dealing with an extremely demanding and challenging climate, which wouldn't necessarily, to my mind, be conducive to the emergence of a settled culture that would be capable of undertaking a project on this scale. And as somebody who's built a lot of things and moved quite a few heavy weights in my time, I find it the idea sort of perplexing to me that they would be. What I would have to ask is, what is their motive? What is their motive for undertaking a project on this scale? Because it's an enormous project, and to move a 20-ton block of stone is really a challenging task to undertake today. Well, without the infrastructure of large machines and so forth. But to do it by hand, it would be an enormous undertaking. And to me, it's like, when are they having time to hunt and gather when you're engaged in a project of this scale?
But we know hunter-gatherers have way more free time than modern society people do. That's the one thing we've learned, is that it's a pretty good way to make a living, actually. They have a better varied diet than we have. This is the Neanderthal diet, right? They have a better varied diet and a lot more free time.
Yeah, but that's within
a lot less stress.
We knew that all along about hunter-gatherers when we were saying they couldn't build megalithic sites.
But we're looking at a time
to do it,
where the environment is undergoing rapid changes, to which adaptations would be extremely challenging. challenging. And we know those changes are going on all over the planet. We know that sea levels are rapidly rising over a period of a few thousand years, from a sea stand low of about 400 feet up to the present level. We also know that biotas were shifting dramatically all over the planet. The effects of the Younger Dryas were global. Pretty much that is, I think, the emerging consensus now, that both hemispheres, north and south, were being affected by the climate changes of the Younger Dryas. So what we're doing is we're placing this phenomena, this project, within this context of these extremely challenging times in which, you know, adaptation to the environmental changes could easily be the all-consuming challenge of the times. I'm just finding it difficult to imagine a disconnect, to see this disconnect between a project of this magnitude and the motive for doing it during a time when obviously the environment could be posing serious constraints upon people's ability to function in that.
Well, Randall, we don't even know the motives of the Easter Islanders and
we
why
don't.
They raised these huge, but we know they did it.
But isn't that become a central question, though? What something had to have motivated them.
But let's get back to Göbekli Tepe. So let's just be real clear here. We know there were humans. We know that it's at least 12,000 years old, and we know that the real dispute here, the real question is, did these people have structures and did they have agriculture? We know that they were human beings. They were essentially modern human beings. So were they hunter-gatherers, or did they have structures and agriculture?
Before Göbekli Tepe, they didn't have structures and they didn't have agriculture. After Göbekli Tepe, they did.
So the fact that they were able to build something so monumental, what kind of a leap is it at all to think that these people could figure out how to plant food and figure out how to make a house?
Well, I mean, again, if you look back 30,000 years, 40,000 years to these cave paintings, these are pretty sophisticated.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
They are.
Clearly, they had abstract reasoning. They could think from the concrete to the abstract and so on. It's not a big reach to go from that to moving stones around.
I'd say there's a big difference between painting and engraving on cave walls.
I don't think so.
And creating the largest megalithic site that's ever been built on Earth.
Wait a minute.
I think there's a huge difference between those two. I mean, nobody would compare the construction effort on Stonehenge or Gigantea with cave paintings. I agree with you. The cave paintings are magnificent. I've had the privilege to visit many of the painted caves. Stunning work. And as Picasso said when he came out of Lascaux, we have invented nothing.
Right.
I mean, that was that modern human mind, symbolic mind at work there. But this is another matter. This is a large-scale construction project that's going on, and it's not just a construction project. It's not like huts. It's hundreds and hundreds of very, very large megalithic pillars which have to be mobilized, brought to the place. You know, organizing a workforce in order to do that, even that requires preparation and time and learning and practice. It's not something that you wake up one morning and just can do overnight.
You think that the paintings are more impressive than Göbekli Tepe?
Yeah, or at least comparable. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
To convey three-dimensionality on a 2D plane, that's what Picasso meant. It's like, wow, that's incredible. It's like developing perspective, and to use the natural shape of the walls to create a three-dimensional perspective look that's pretty abstract.
You're comparing apples and pears. It's not a construction project.
Okay,
I don't think it's even remotely. But I don't think it's even remotely as impressive.
What I'm saying is that it doesn't take a huge leap of the imagination to think these people were pretty smart. They had
we know that they were smart. We know what they were smart just because of the fact that those construction projects were done by whoever. We know that they were smart. Whoever built Göbekli Tepe was clearly intelligent. Whoever made those 3D carvings, clearly they were intelligent. But to think that someone drawing on cave paintings is more impressive than erecting 20-foot stone columns with three-dimensional carvings on them of a lot of animals that weren't even native to the region.
That's
is that debatable?
Not necessarily the case.
Because they could have been.
No. The animals were native to.
But my point, Joe, is that these paintings are like, say, 30, 40,000 years old to Göbekli Tepe. So there's tens of thousands of years to develop more that we're very likely to find more archaeological sites.
And yet, up till now, we haven't found that. We haven't found all of that intermediate material. Which is, see, if I could actually see that intermediate material between the upper Paleolithic cave art and Göbekli Tepe, if I could see the gradual evolution and development of skills, I wouldn't need to invoke a lost civilization, the survivors of a lost civilization who've mastered those skills elsewhere, to come in and teach those skills at Göbekli Tepe. But it still looks to me like a transfer of technology, unless you can show me that evolutionary process whereby I can understand how this group of hunter-gatherers became equipped to create this giant site, where they practiced, where they learned the skills to move the stones, to organize the workforce, to feed and water the workforce in a rather dry place. All of that is actually quite a logistical challenge.
Yep, and obviously somebody met it somehow.
Some humans.
Yes,
right. So the real question is, did they have structures? Did they have agriculture? Did they have some sort of a community where they lived in an established location?
Like I would imagine so.
That would push back the time where we thought that there was a civilization. That would push them back into a realm of at least stepping out of the hunter-gatherer stage.
Now,
correct?
your guy Schmid, as you show in your book, he did not go as far as you guys.
Certainly not.
Right.
No.
But he admitted it's a mystery. Okay, why? That would be the scientific approach. I don't know what it is. Great mystery. Let's just wait and see. Versus, I'm going to postulate a lost civilization. Nothing wrong with that, Graham. It's a free country, and scientists do this all the time, as you've mentioned.
There's a rather humorous thing, which I have to say. Actually, I might even ask Jamie to pull up the couple of images of Fingerprints of the Gods. That's the book I'm best known for. And when I published Fingerprints of the Gods in 1995, essentially I was saying civilization is much older and much more mysterious than we thought. And I was ridiculed for proposing that. 2013, one of the magazines that ridiculed me, New Scientist magazine in Britain, publishes as a cover story picture of Göbekli Tepe and the headline: civilization is much older and much more mysterious than we thought.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. And scientists do this. I mean, I've followed paleoanthropology for my whole adult life, and one of the big mysteries is, how did we get a big brain? How did we get to abstract reasoning from say what chimps can do? No one knows.
The doubling of the human brain size over a period of 2 million years,
and because no one knows, every couple of years there's a new book out. It's climate change. It was
the throwing arm, cooking
that's
food.
That's right, cooking meat. You know, meat is another big one. A Harvard professor, meat. Okay, and these books come and go, and some of them have legs, some of them don't, and it's just the way it goes.
And then there's Terence McKenna's
It's pretty obvious it was psychedelics.
Yeah, that's Terence McKenna's
not that made the brain
theory.
bigger, but that switched the brain
on. Is this
on.
the old Julian?
Julian Jaynes? No, the bicameral mind, not at all. This is David Lewis Williams, who's professor of anthropology at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. His neuropsychological theory of cave art, all kudos to Terence McKenna and Food of the Gods. What a brilliant thinker, what a brilliant alternative thinker. But David Lewis Williams at the University of Witwatersrand had been working on this problem since 1973, and his argument is that the remarkable similarities that we see in rock and cave art all around the world are explained that we're dealing with a shamanistic art. Shamanism involves altered states of consciousness. This is typical visions of altered states of consciousness, and it seems to have accompanied a great leap forward in human behavior.
And you covered this in your book.
I covered it in Supernatural.
Supernatural.
Yeah. As did Richard Wrangham's theory. This is a highly regarded scientist at Harvard. So he's the meat-eating guy. That it's cooking meat.
Right.
So by cooking the protein, that's what gives you the energy to build a huge brain. All right. So now this guy is starting with 10 pluses on his side. He's Harvard and already respected, and even so, his book was like, maybe.
Well, it's probably a series of different events and a bunch of different factors.
That's right. Could be a number of different things.
So let's get away from Göbekli Tepe and ancient civilizations, and let's get back to the geological evidence, which, Randall, you're an expert at. And this is one of the main things that you had a dispute with, and this is one of the reasons why we got everybody together. Now, what is your thoughts on what Randall and Graham proposed, specifically Randall, who is much more on the geological side of things?
Yeah. Well, this is why I brought in my phone a friend, a geologist. So, but by way of background, after your show, I thought, let's just give this a fair hearing. This is what we do. So this will be our cover story, and I think the end of summer issue comes out. We're only quarterly.
I hope that Mark Defant is going to be doing some more work on the draft of his article for you that is up online, because that article is full of bullshit statements about me which are demonstrably false.
Well, he's on.
Yeah, he's there, and I'm happy to engage with those particular issues. Well, I'll have to put on my reading glasses.
And that, whatever article's online, this has not been published yet.
Well,
so
it claims that it's a draft of the article that will appear in a 2017 edition of Skeptic magazine.
So pull it up, Graham, and
sure.
Give you a chance to have your time of court.
Yeah.
Let's let Graham go over it first, and then we'll have Mark on to refute what he said.
So here's Defant on Magicians of the Gods. And by the way, Michael, I mean, you say that you're here to, to respectfully aim to get at the truth.
Yeah.
There it is. Conjuring up a lost civilization from nothing.
Yeah, let me just get to the top of this. I've got it here. Just bear with me a second. So amongst the words in Mark Defant's article, he's accusing me of duping the public. He's saying that I'm public enemy number one. He's accusing me of arm waving. I admit I do wave my arms. Pontificating. Well, my grandfather was a minister of the church. Little interest in peer-reviewed research. Claimed that no academic would debate. That's utter bullshit. I had a debate with Zahi Hawass. He's a leading Egyptologist. Back in 2015, it was not my fault that Zahi Hawass walked out on that debate. I can play the video if you like, 1.5 minutes of Zahi Hawass lambasting me and then walking out and refusing to debate further. So it's bullshit to say I don't debate or I'm not willing to debate. And finally, he says that I'm conning a hellacious number of people into buying his books. Now, how can we get any dialogue going when somebody begins like that? And
okay.
Then would you like some further? Bear with me, because I just have to scroll down and I don't have a mouse. So Hancock and Carlson claimed several times that no academic would debate them. Not true. I'm accused of doing an about face since Fingerprints of the Gods. Are my views not allowed to evolve with new evidence? Is that somehow a crime on my part? Let me just finish.
Yeah.
Then a cheap shot. He cites Jesus Gamarra and accuses me of not having the scientific knowledge to deal with issues of gravitation. Now, it's true that Jesus Gamarra, who is a descendant of the Incas, who has worked 70 years on the megaliths of Sacsayhuaman, whose father before him, Alfredo Gamarra, worked 70 years. It's true that he's got a way-out theory about gravitation. Thing is, I state in my book that it's a way-out theory. What I go on to say, quoted in the attack, is that, however, this isn't the part of his theory I'm interested in. Where I feel he is solidly persuasive is in his observations of the anomalous character of the monuments of the Andes, etc., etc. Defant doesn't cite that. He just presents me as buying what Jesus Gamarra says. I mean, if that's the standard that you're going to have in Skeptic magazine, you have a serious problem. And then Göbekli Tepe, he contends that Göbekli Tepe is too advanced to have been completed by hunter-gatherers and must have been constructed by a more advanced civilization. Well, no, that's not what I say. I say it was constructed by hunter-gatherers, but that they were advised and supported by people who had knowledge of this kind of work beforehand.
How is that different?
Well, I think it's very different. I'm not saying it was constructed by. I'm saying that a group of people settled amongst hunter-gatherers and transferred some skills for them. He says that, he quotes me, Hancock makes the following stunning claim, quote, "Our ancestors are being initiated into the secrets of metals and how to make swords and knives." I do not make that claim. I'm reporting that this claim is made in the Book of Enoch. That is not my claim. Then what else?
So you don't think that's the explanation?
Well, I'm being misrepresented by your author here.
But I mean, all right,
if he wants to represent me, if he accuses me of cherry picking, he shouldn't cherry pick my statements. He should quote it in full context.
We're still working on this. Let's get it right.
Well, it's
so
out there. It's out there on the internet.
You're still working on it, but it's published online.
Here's a beautiful one.
I didn't know it was online.
Here's a beautiful one. He cites Klaus Schmidt on the character. Schmidt makes a salient point, almost as if he anticipated Hancock's book. Quote, "Fabulous or mythical creatures such as centaurs or the sphinx, winged bulls or horses do not yet occur in the iconography, and therefore in the mythology of prehistoric times they must be recognized as creations of the high cultures which arose later." Well, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. You've just been talking about the painted caves. Go to Chauvet Cave. You'll see a lion man, Hohensteinstad, a lion man carved out of mammoth ivory. Go to Chauvet, bison man, straddling lion woman. Her right arm is transforming into the head of a lion. So certainly these mythical creatures did exist in the Upper Paleolithic, and it's rubbish to say that they didn't. I mean, how can I go on? The teapot. Oh yeah. Okay, so he's taking issue with me because I suggest that the vulture on Pillar 43 in Enclosure D is representing the teapot asterism of the constellation of Sagittarius, and he goes and gives us little things of Uncle Sam and some other thing that he shows. Anybody can impose any image on anything. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not my fault that a couple of academics who didn't even talk to me and had nothing whatsoever to do to me have published a major study in the, I quote it again, the Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry, a peer-reviewed journal, where they make precisely that identification. So at least I'm not alone. At least there are peer-reviewed credentialed scholars who also agree that that figure is representing the teapot asterism within the constellation of Sagittarius. No reference to that. Schoch's opinions were supposed to not go into the minutiae because they've already been dismissed by a study by Liritzis and Vafiadou. Far from it. That study doesn't dismiss Schoch at all. None of that study was done on the body of the Sphinx itself. It was done in the Valley and the Sphinx temples. And by the way, the dates are extremely troubling. Some of them could push it as far as 3,600 BC that the work was done, or as early in some cases as 1,000 BC. I don't think that study proves anything, and so on and so forth.
Just to clarify what you do believe then, so that we don't misrepresent you, so you don't think that the lost civilization instructed them on the use of metals?
I don't know. I don't see evidence for that in Göbekli Tepe.
But why would you put that in the book then?
I didn't put it in the book. I was quoting the Book of Enoch. It's a huge passage on the Book of Enoch. It's not me who's saying that. It's the Book of Enoch that's saying that.
I understand, but why? I forget
all I require your defant to do is to state that Hancock is citing the Book of Enoch. He didn't do that. What's the word?
Fair enough.
Disingenuous? Is that the polite word you guys use?
But
it seems more than disingenuous. It's a character assassination.
Well, but what the question is what's the context of including that in your book? I forget.
Well, the context is that actually I was criticizing Zechariah Sitchin. That's primarily what I was doing.
So you don't think that a lost civilization instructed the people who built Göbekli Tepe on the use of metals and tools?
I see no evidence for that. I see Göbekli Tepe. I can't go say they instructed them on the use of metals and tools unless I can find evidence for it.
Well, so what did they do?
We don't know.
They generated agriculture. They created a center of excellence around which a hunter-gatherer...
Not they who built Göbekli Tepe. The lost civilization that advised them that you think happened.
Yeah.
What did they do if they...
They've come through a cataclysm. They're survivors, few in number. This is my scenario. You don't have to accept it. I'm sure you don't. They take refuge amongst hunter-gatherers. I mean, I don't know. You're probably have some survival skills. I don't have many. I mean, if we were to have a comet impact in the world today, which were to take out all the underpinnings of modern civilization, I might go settle with hunter-gatherers because they're the people who know best how to live in that situation.
I have no survival skills.
Yeah, so go settle amongst hunter-gatherers. But I might be able to transfer some of my knowledge to them. I might have something that I could transfer to them, and I might have very strong reasons why I might not choose to transfer all of it.
But so in other words, perhaps this is what happened. Okay, maybe, but how is that different from Zechariah Sitchin's that, well, the aliens advised them?
Well, I don't need different. I think it's massively different, especially since Zechariah Sitchin has his aliens arriving here in 1970s NASA technology. Weirdly, he wrote his book in the 1970s. I mean, I don't go there. I don't make that. I don't make that suggestion. I'm simply saying, perhaps there's been a forgotten episode in human history. Perhaps its fingerprints are present at a number of sites around the world, but perhaps the extremely defensive, arrogant, and patronizing attitude of mainstream academia is stopping us from considering that possibility, and therefore I campaign to get that possibility considered, and I try to do so with as loud a voice as possible.
Well, you're doing it. You're doing it, man.
But doesn't it disturb you that you run Skeptic magazine and someone publishes something like that? I mean, that goes against the whole idea of critical thinking. I mean, it's misrepresenting his quotes. It's misrepresenting his perspective, his point of view. It's really disingenuous.
This is one reason we're doing this, so we could get his...
But why would anybody write something like that? And why would you guys publish something like that without checking the facts?
We are. This was not supposed to be posted online.
And why is such a person...
It's online, though. How does something get online if it's not supposed to?
Why is such a person who will do that a useful contributor to your side of the debate?
Well, one of the reasons we're here is to get your point of view exactly right. All right, so you're saying that there's no evidence that any lost civilization exists. Only the
I'm not saying that.
Only the fingerprints of their influence on later peoples we do know existed.
I'm saying there are physical objects. I say Göbekli Tepe is one of them. I say the Sphinx is another.
But see, this is that argument from either ignorance or personal incredulity. I don't accept the mainstream, or I can't think of how this pyramids could have been built, therefore it was built by somebody else through some other technology.
That's not what he's saying.
That's not what I'm saying.
They're just post-dating it.
What I'm saying is the Sphinx is older. I do go with Robert Schoch's argument on the geology. I'm also very interested in the astronomy of the site. And again, I have slides that I could show on this if we have time. You might want to get into Ed Krupp's criticism of the Orion correlation and why he says it's upside down. I can talk to you about that. You know,
we do. I mean, I know Ed Krupp's argument about that. And that was from the 90s, I think.
What's your thoughts on Robert Schoch's conclusions?
I don't. That's not something I know much about.
Well, you should.
That's a huge factor. It's a huge factor because it's all about water erosion.
Mark knows about Schoch, and he rejects him on the basis of that paper.
Yeah,
and that paper really doesn't date the Sphinx. It works with dating of large blocks in the valley and the Sphinx temples. There's not a single sample taken from the Sphinx.
All right, then who dated it?
Who dated it? Liritsis and Vafiadou.
And then why do mainstream archaeologists not accept the older date for the Sphinx? And the answer is because they have a bunch of other evidence that points to the date that they think it does.
The answer to your question is very simple. Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass put it on record back in 1992 when John Anthony West and Robert Schoch first presented the rainfall erosion evidence on the Sphinx. And what Lehner and Hawass said is the Sphinx can't possibly be 12,000 plus years old because there was no other culture anywhere in the world that was capable of creating large-scale monumental architecture like this. Show me one other structure that's capable of doing that. Well, they could say that in 1992, Michael, but they can't say it in 2017, not since Göbekli Tepe's been excavated.
If you don't mind, Graham, could you please, for people, so this could be a standalone thing, people could understand, what is the argument about the Sphinx, the enclosure of the Sphinx? And Dr. Robert Schoch from Boston University, who's a geologist, what was his conclusion?
What Schoch is saying is that the Sphinx and the trench out of which the Sphinx is cut bears the unmistakable evidence of precipitation-induced weathering caused by exposure to a substantial period of heavy rainfall. And that is particularly pointed out in the vertical fissures in the trench. So you see, the Sphinx itself has been subject to so much restoration over so many years that it's difficult for people to even see the core body of the Sphinx today. But it's these, you can see the vertical fissures even down at the back of there. That is what Schoch counts as rainfall, precipitation-induced weathering, heavy rainfall, which is selectively removing the softer layers and leaving the harder layers in place. And the problem is we don't have that rainfall in Giza, in Egypt, 4,500 years ago. You have to go back much earlier to get that rainfall. That's the suggestion.
So that's the suggestion by Robert Schoch, independently of your conclusions.
Totally independently, yeah. Schoch disagrees with me on many things, as a matter of fact, and I disagree with him on many things, but I think he's on the money on this.
So that alone would set back at least that one. I mean, it's pretty much established that the Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed about 2,500 BC, right?
There's absolutely no doubt that a huge project went on at Giza around 2,500 BC.
So your argument is not that the whole thing was that much older, was that parts of it seem to have been from an earlier civilization, or at least that civilization far, far earlier than
I would say that the ground plan, what we have at Giza, the basic layout of the site, was established in what the ancient Egyptians called Zep Tepi, the first time. Astronomically and geologically, I and my colleagues suggest that the first time can be dated to the period of about 12,500 to 13,000 years ago. That was when the site was laid out, because there's intriguing astronomical alignments of the Great Pyramids to the Belt of Orion. I know Ed Krupp has a completely opposite view on this, and of the Great Sphinx to the constellation of Leo, rising due east, housing the sun on the equinox, the astrological age of Leo. Again, I have slides I can.
And that would align with the geological evidence that Robert Schoch concludes.
It aligns with the geological evidence. The age of Leo pretty much exactly spans the Younger Dryas, as a matter of fact.
And so the only argument against that at the time was that there were no other structures like that from 12,000 years ago.
Correct. And then Krupp said that the Orion correlation wasn't real because it was upside down. I mean, do you want to get into that now?
Well, first, that's not the only argument. It's that, okay, if the Sphinx is built, or the layout for the whole thing is built in, say 10, 11,000 years ago, and then the pyramids are built, 2,500 BC. What happened in between? Where are all the people, the trash, the places where they lived?
Well, there's
in
a bunch of different styles of construction.
Something like
but not dated in between.
I would propose, Michael, something like a monastery, which has a relatively small archaeological footprint, is on the site. I mean, the idea of information, knowledge, and traditions lasting for thousands of years within a religious system shouldn't be too absurd to us. I mean, Judaism is dealing with ideas that are already best part of 4,000 years old if we go back to Ur of the Chaldees and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So that's all I'm suggesting, really, that the idea is preserved, maintained, that the survivors of the on the site, but in something like a monastery, which has got a very small archaeological footprint. It is not high. Perhaps, again, one can only speculate. And I think there's a lot of speculation on the archaeological side too. One can only speculate, perhaps having gone through a cataclysm, perhaps they felt to blame for this, wrongly or rightly. I mean, there are many, many traditions in which humanity's behavior is implicated in the cataclysm that takes place. And perhaps they didn't want to switch civilization on completely right there. Perhaps they waited, passed down the knowledge through initiates. Enough was there to create a mystery, because it's undoubtedly a mystery that the construction of the Great Pyramids, the first huge pyramids in Egypt, preceded only really by the Zoser pyramid at Saqqara, that the construction of the Great Pyramids is vastly superior to the construction of the pyramids of the 5th and 6th dynasty that follow it. And that's a little bit counterintuitive, that we have this collapse in skills. One would have expected it to got better. So it sounds like the work on the pyramids started already with a level of knowledge in hand.
Yes, but okay, so here's how I would think about that. There's a lot of perhapsing and maybes because yes, well, so you have a bunch of Egyptologists and archaeologists who have been working on this site for centuries. This is one of the most ancient mysteries and so on, and so let's say there's like 20 lines of evidence that point to built roughly around this time period here, and then you come on and say, okay, but there's this one anomaly of the rain thing, that there was only rain at this time. Now there's a huge gap. You have one anomaly or line of evidence here and like 20 here.
Well, we're talking about different structures, though. There's not a lot of evidence that points to the Sphinx being from a particular time period.
Well, he's saying like 12,000, right?
I'm saying the rainfall evidence suggests that.
But other evidence.
And its alignment with the constellation of Leo housing the sun at dawn on the spring equinox. It's an equinoctial marker. Nobody would dispute that. Nobody would dispute that the ancient Egypt... Well, no. I mean, if you make a monument pointing perfectly due east... I've stood on the back of the Sphinx at dawn on the spring equinox, and believe me, again, I could show a picture. Its head lines up perfectly with the rising sun. But no, I don't think anybody, even Krupp, is disputing that it's an equinoctial marker. Now, here's the thing. You're an ancient Egyptian. You're building an equinoctial marker in 2,500 BC. Do you know what constellation is housing the sun in 2,500 BC?
I haven't run the little program.
Well, it's the constellation of Taurus. So logically, if you're creating an equinoctial, and the ancient Egyptians were not shy about making images of bulls. Plenty of them. If you're making an equinoctial marker in 2,500 BC, you really should create it in the form of a bull, not in the form of a lion. That's the puzzling issue. And yet we do have a time when a lion constellation housed the sun at dawn on the spring equinox, and that is the period of the Younger Dryas.
Okay, I'd say that's a pretty big leap.
Well, I know you'd say that, and your colleagues all say that too.
And then we have a gap of about 5,000 or 6,000 years where there's nothing. There's no.
Let me interject there.
Yeah,
Can I interject?
Yeah, please do.
I'm going to refer back to several articles that were published in the 80s and 90s. This one is from Nature, early 80s, late Quaternary history of the Nile. And what it's discussing is the evidence that there was a major shift in the hydraulic regime of the Nile River. It says between 20,000 and 12,000 years before present, when timberline in the headwaters was lower, vegetation cover more open than today, the Nile was a highly seasonal braided river, which brought mixed coarse and fine sediments down to Egypt and Sudan. This cold, dry interval had ended by 12,500 years before present, when overflow from Lake Victoria and higher rainfall in Ethiopia sent extraordinary floods down the main Nile. And those floods have been documented to have been 120 feet above the modern floodplain of the Nile. Any civilization, or whatever you want to call it, living along the Nile River at that time would have had to abandon whatever they were doing there in this regime, this intensified hydraulic regime. And it goes on to say, it marked a revolutionary change to continuous flow with a superimposed flood peak. So what happened is that there was a major environmental change that occurred right there around 12,000 to 12,500 years. The dating could be adjusted somewhat since the early 80s, but the point is made is that because of a major hydrological change, major vegetational cover change, major environmental change, this would have caused also imposed changes upon whatever culture was existing there or living there at the time. Now what we have is, in the aftermath of that event, we have basically the emergence of desert, which now would require serious adaptation. It's very likely, too, that these events could have also decimated the population at the time, leaving basically no workforce. And then over a period of 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 years, you find that there's enough of a recovery that these kind of monumental structures can be renewed. But it's clear from this and a lot of other studies in the Eastern Mediterranean showing that there are saprapel layers, which is basically material that has been washed in from the continental surface that has not oxidized. It has essentially become rotten and carried in, organic material carried in off of the continents by this enhanced regime of water flow, actually forcing so much water that there was a freshwater lid on the Eastern Mediterranean that caused a cessation in the circulation between the upper waters and the lower waters, reducing the amount of oxygen brought down to the lower waters. And so you had these layers of mud that formed on the bottom of the Mediterranean that show this massive influx of fresh water flowing out of the Nile and off of the Egyptian continent at this same time. So clearly the evidence shows that there were major climatic changes that occurred around this time. It is not so speculative to imagine that whoever, whatever, and we don't have to invoke any kind of a super advanced civilization, but whatever cultures were there that were perhaps capable of carving blocks of stone, transporting blocks of stone, as they were at Göbekli Tepe during this time range, would have been, that their activity would have been interrupted to the extent that it might have taken millennia to recover, to get the labor force necessary to undertake major monumental programs on the Giza Plateau. So I think that if we assume this gradualistic scenario, yeah, that's a fair question to ask. What happened in that interval? But if there is a major climatic downturn and a major disruption of the settled patterns of whatever culture was already there, then, now we might have an explanation why there would be a gap, especially if these events caused a bottleneck in the population of the area. Of course, this is all speculative, but it is not speculative to say that there is multiple lines of evidence suggesting these major, even cataclysmic changes that engulfed that part of the world during that era. So that could provide an explanation of why there is a gap there.
Makes a ton of sense.
Well, does it? Because
does it not?
Only if you have to have the Sphinx in conjunction with 12,000 years ago in the lost civilization. Mm-hmm. If you just say the rainwater erosion on the Sphinx is not an explanation for the age, and that the traditional accepted age is what we think it is, then there's no gap to fill. Yeah. So really, all we're talking about is we have, again, lots of evidence here, one anomaly here. I really want the anomaly thing to stick, so I got to explain the gap. The gap is explained by environmental changes.
Yeah, but what is the lots of evidence other than a lot of assumptions?
It's
and
all
a lot
assumptions.
of maybes.
It's all. I mean, actually, can you cite me a single contemporary inscription from the date that the Sphinx is supposed to have been made that refers to the Sphinx?
I'm sorry.
Can you cite a single contemporary inscription from ancient contemporary to the date that Egyptologists ascribe to the Sphinx? In other words, to the reign of Khufu. Can you cite me a single inscription that talks about the Sphinx being built?
This is not. I don't study this area. I don't know.
Okay, well, you can't, because there is no such inscription.
Okay, well, so.
Well, one would have thought there would be.
Well, maybe.
It's a giant project. It's 270 feet long. It's 70 feet high. It's carved out of solid rock. Nothing.
Okay, but you have
no reference to it at all in the Old Kingdom. You actually have to come down to the New Kingdom to get references to the Sphinx in inscriptions.
So, but you've already said that the pyramids were built at the time we think they were built, not thousands of years ago.
I would say that a great deal of work was done on the pyramids at the time of 2500 BC. I think the ground plan was laid out earlier.
And we have like the step pyramid, which is cruder and not as well designed as the other pyramids. That's a transitional stage at that time.
Often argued to be a transitional stage.
Yeah.
Have you been to the step pyramid, I'm sure?
No, not.
Right. And you've been to Giza, though?
No, I've never been to Giza.
Oh, dear. Well, they do make a very different impact. I mean, I've climbed the Great Pyramid 5 times. And I mean, you're dealing with something orders of magnitude different in terms of what's required. I mean, this thing weighs 6 million tons.
I understand, but
it's 481 feet high. It consists of 2.5 million individual blocks of stone. It's a line to true north within 3/60ths of a single degree. I mean, to compare that to Zoser is really not a valid comparison at all. What's more interesting to me is the radical decline that takes place in pyramid building skills in the 5th and 6th dynasty. Go to Unas, go to Pepi, go to Teti at Saqqara. These are a shambles. You can hardly even recognize them as a pyramid. What happened to all that knowledge that's invested in the Great Pyramid? Why does Egypt devolve so rapidly? How do we explain this pristine, amazing work that's done on the Great Pyramid unless there's a legacy of knowledge being attached to it?
Okay, so every archaeologist, Egyptian archaeologist and Egyptiologist knows everything you just said.
They do.
And they don't accept any of your arguments. Why not?
That's why I'm needed, because somebody's got to counter this.
Is it just that they're closed-minded and they follow Zahi Hawass and they never think for themselves?
You want to see a closed mind? I'll play you a 1.5-minute video of Zahi Hawass refusing to debate with me.
But all of them, every one of the Egyptologists and archaeologists over the last 2 centuries and so on, they're all dogmatically closed-minded and they can't see the arguments as clear as you? Or is it they're not convinced by your argument?
They're not convinced by my argument. They genuinely and absolutely believe that their argument is right. The notion that I'm proposing is apparently so preposterous to them that it isn't even worthy of consideration, but it is worthy of insults and attacks on me, on my integrity, on my decency as a human being, on my honesty. All of those things get attacked, because mainstream, and that's fine. I'm ready for that. And by the way, I know that archaeologists, academics constantly attack each other all the time. I used to take this stuff personally, but then when I see what they do to each other, the ravaging attack dogs are let loose on any new idea. I sometimes wish scientists would actually look for what's good in a new idea rather than what's bad. But I get why they do look for what's bad.
But in other words, some young graduate student working in that area could make a name for himself by overturning,
My son was a young graduate student at the University of Cardiff studying Egyptology. He got marked down in his degree because he proposed the possibility that the pyramids and the Sphinx might be or might have older origins. He was impressed by my work. It did him a lot of harm in his degree.
And if all this was true, then eventually
you haven't answered my point.
It would come out.
You haven't answered my point.
Which is
if you go against the mainstream view, your career does not progress as an Egyptologist.
I disagree. I mean,
give me an example.
How is it that we know anything that we know about Egyptology?
Give me an example
now?
From Egyptology of somebody who's gone against the mainstream view and been lauded for so doing.
Well, look, we don't believe everything about it that we believed 2 centuries ago, at, say, Napoleon's time, right? How did all that knowledge come about? How did all the change in that science develop?
It really begins with Champollion and the deciphering of the Rosetta Stone.
All right. How was he able to do that against the mainstream?
There was no mainstream.
All right. So
that he was against. There was no mainstream. The mainstream has taken time to form, and it's very solid now.
I mean,
Egyptologists all sing from the same hymn book. You'll find very little disagreement amongst them on anything.
This is true in every field, but somehow or another, Einstein managed to make an impact because he turned out to be right.
Well, I'm no Einstein, and I don't know if I'm right, but I'm going to continue to oppose that mainstream.
And
somebody has to.
I don't know if that's a valid comparison, Einstein and archaeology.
All right, well, take paleoanthropology. I mean, it's a completely different field now than a century ago. How did that happen if no one ever accepts new ideas? They do. It happens all of the time.
Well, they're being forced to accept Göbekli Tepe, and that's a new idea. Where you were talking about things taking a long time, and what seems like a long time to us is really a blink of the eye in terms of archaeology. We're in the middle of that. We're essentially in the middle of that with things like Göbekli Tepe, with Forbes publishing an article about the Younger Dryas possibly being impacted by comets and that being one of the causes of a mass extinction.
Right, and when
these are all mainstream ideas now.
And when Alvarez proposed the impact hypothesis for the demise of the dinosaurs in 1980, it was ridiculed, but he turned out to be right, and then that became the accepted.
Right, it takes time.
Well, but what was the key turning point?
People are challenging that.
Wasn't the key turning point the finding of the crater? That's what made the difference.
Yeah, so
it's kind of hard to argue with that.
So again, where's your crater?
Well, this is where perhaps we need to bring in our phone a friend. Malcolm Lecomte, one of the Younger Dryas impact scientists. I mean, the point being made is the following: firstly, that the primary impacts were on ice. There may have been as many as 4 impacts, that they were on the North American ice cap. Some craters have been suggested, for example, very deep holes in the Great Lakes. Other craters have been and will be looked at by the team in the coming months, whether it includes the Coruscant crater, the Quebec terrain, and so on and so forth. There are candidates. The crater has not been found yet, but I would be surprised if a crater was easy to find when the impact is on 2-mile deep ice. And one of the biggest strewn fields in the world, which is the Australian tektite strewn field, there's no crater associated with that, but everybody accepts the impact proxies. There's enough of them to justify that, and that's what's going on around this impact hypothesis.
So on a related question to that is not the lost civilizations and the demise of humans, but the megafaunal extinction of North American mammals. So this has been long debated before the impact hypothesis was proposed, and the competing hypotheses were overhunting. Humans just hunted them to the point where, not every last one, to the point where the population numbers get too low and these species can't survive. Or climate change, or both. The climate change weakened the populations, then the humans came over and overhunted them. All right, so and then the impact hypothesis is proposed. Okay, so this was debated, and it didn't fare that well because there were a lot of mammals and other species that didn't go extinct that you would expect from a massive impact like that. It would have wiped out. Why the selected species, the kinds of species that humans would hunt, are the ones that went extinct, whereas these others didn't?
Well, why would humans be hunting the largest? There's no evidence that humans hunted the predators. There is evidence that they hunted woolly mammoths, but it's a very sparse. I mean, you have no more than a dozen sites that show association between human hunting and mammoths. And a lot of those, like the Lubbock Lake site, is now being questioned. What was previously interpreted as being butchering marks on the mammoth remains there are now being reinterpreted as possibly natural marks on the mammoth bones. But it's a big stretch to go from, okay, we've got a dozen sites where we have mammoth remains, and along with those mammoth remains, we find a few Clovis spear points. In 2 or 3 cases, we actually find, or they have found, spear points embedded within the mammoth, like in the rib cage. But it's a very large stretch to go from there to say that 10 or 12 million woolly mammoths, or 4 species of mammoths on 4 continents, were wiped out by Paleo-Indian hunters, probably in bands of no more than 2 or 3 dozen.
Have you ever been to a head smashed in buffalo site?
Yes, but that's a good example, because nowhere did that go anywhere close to exterminating the species of American bison.
But each site has its own particular explanation. Could be hunting, could be a massive flood, earthquake, whatever.
Could be a massive flood, yes, exactly. I think there you and I would be in complete agreement.
What does it mean by massive? There's global versus local. So, for example, there's 52 mammalian genera went extinct in South America. Why would they go extinct in South America? About the time that humans were moving down there hunting.
The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis includes South America. There were impacts there.
It does, and again, the dating of the migration of humans into South America is controversial at this point. There is evidence that humans were there long before. Paul Martin's idea of blitzkrieg requires that the animals be so stupid that they couldn't they had no adaptive capabilities to the appearance of a new predatory species. But what is being demonstrated from examining the lifeways of the Paleo-Indian peoples is that they had very diversified diets, and they were hunter-gatherers. Now, why would they be choosing the largest, most dangerous animals to hunt when they had such a proliferation of other smaller animals? We know that they were foraging. We know that they were eating seafood. There was and fishing, because all of this is being found in the camps. And then it certainly doesn't explain the extermination of the cave bears, the short-faced bears, the camelops, the giant beavers, the giant armadillos, the American Pleistocene lion, the ground sloths that were the size of giraffes, 4 species of proboscideans, meaning mammoths, extinct on 4 continents. And to me, like, wait a second. We cannot invoke a modern example to say, well, here
How about the Maori?
Well, that's controversial also.
I mean, they drove the Maori extinct in
Past eagle.
Well, that's an assumption there. If you ask the Maori themselves,
between that and people with atlatls killing off all the saber-toothed tigers. But here's another answer to one of your questions. You were saying, like, why would some of the animals be alive? Well, we know that the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago didn't kill everything.
Right.
And that is a massive impact, far bigger than anything we're talking about, and many, many animals survived that. So we don't know why things survive and why they don't. It could be proximity to the impact.
Right.
It could be that their food source wasn't removed. It could be that their predators were wiped out and they managed to survive. I mean, there's a lot of animals that are alive today in this continent. Like, for instance, a pronghorn antelope. Pronghorn antelope. Dan Flores, who's a wildlife historian, wrote an amazing book on it. And when he was talking about the American savanna during, like 15,000 plus years ago, there was all sorts of crazy animals millions of years ago that were like cheetahs that were running down animals at extreme speeds, which is the reason why pronghorn antelopes can run so much faster than any of their current predators. Something much faster than them was killing them, and that was wiped out, but they managed to make it. One of the reasons why they probably managed to make it is because their predators were wiped out. So it's not an even
and
impact.
another point, Michael, if it's overkill, it's intriguing that the overkill occurs, precisely in the Younger Dryas window, because I think you'd agree that now the whole story of the peopling of the Americas is pretty much up for grabs. I mean, Clovis first was the dominant model for a very long time, and under that model we're to envisage these Clovis hunters coming in across the Bering Land Bridge, going down the ice-free corridor, and then in like 800 years with their sophisticated fluted points they wipe out all the mammoths in North America. But now we know that humans have been coexisting and butchering mammoths, coexisting with mammoths for thousands of years before that, possibly tens of thousands of years before that.
You mean from evidence in Siberia?
I don't only mean from evidence in Siberia. I mean, I can cite you from Nature magazine just recently. Huge number. I don't think the Yukon is in Siberia, is it?
No.
Okay,
I think the Yukon's in North America. Jacques Mars, the excavator of the Bluefish Caves in the Yukon, back in the 1970s was proposing that human beings had been in the Americas at least 24,000 years ago. His reputation was utterly destroyed. His research funding was withdrawn. He was given no access to grants. He wasn't able to do his work. He was heavily penalized and punished by the community. And now, just a few weeks ago, we have the Smithsonian coming out and saying, sorry, we got it wrong. Jacques Mars was right all along. And Tom Dillahay, with his work in Monteverde, the shit that he had to take, I think we're in a very interesting time. The peopling of the Americas is really a paradigm that has absolutely been overthrown. The notion of Clovis first. Well, you disagree with Smithsonian then, which is fine. I do too.
No, the Mesa Verde, it's it's an anomaly. It's an isolated site. Where are all the sites between Clovis and Monteverde?
Do you honestly think Clovis was still first?
For thousands and thousands of years.
Come on, Michael. Do you think Clovis was still first?
Where are all the people between Clovis and Monteverde?
Not my problem.
It is your problem.
No, it's not my problem. They're there in Monteverde and they're there in North America.
Okay,
Go
so
figure.
What's more likely?
Go figure why there's a Denisovan trace in South American Indians and not in North American Indians.
It's like the Nature paper I brought up earlier.
Maybe people crossed the ocean.
That there were Neanderthals or humans in San Diego 130,000 years ago. Okay, but when you look at that, Okay, so they have mammoth bones. It looks like they might have been broken in the length, you know, okay? And the tools, but they're not, okay, the tools.
We're kind of changing subjects here, though.
Well, no.
You're trying to quibble the evidence of earlier human presence.
That's right.
You're trying to quibble it.
Well, not quibble. Just
you're quibbling it. You're quibbling it.
But
And you've got every right to challenge it.
What are you saying very specifically that's opposing what he just said?
The reason archaeologists don't accept earlier than Clovis, say earlier than about 13,000, 14,000 years.
It's massively accepted.
Like say Mesa Verde, for example.
Okay, I have to bring up an image at this
Why don't they accept Mesa Verde?
They do accept Mesa Verde.
It
is accepted
Michael,
now.
are you sure about this?
As what, 24,000 years?
15 plus, possibly significantly.
Yeah. Okay. So
significantly
15,
older.
So 15 is kind of the outside of the window that humans came across the Bering Strait. That's possible. Not 24,000 years.
Could you open Clovis first?
Not 130,000 years ago. Now, if it turns out that Nature paper is right and that's confirmed, then that does overturn the mainstream theory for sure.
But why would you? This is not like your field of study. Why would you argue against the Nature paper?
Okay, I'll just give you.
Let's quote the Smithsonian.
I ask professionals.
Smithsonian, slide number 5. Today, decades later, the Clovis first model has collapsed. Okay, based on dozens of new studies, we now know that pre-Clovis peoples slaughtered mastodons in Washington state, dined on desert parsley in Oregon, made all-purpose stone tools that were Ice Age version of the exact
between 13,008. That's not.
No, look at this.
All between that and then 24,000 years down at the bottom, Michael. You know, are you saying the Smithsonian are wrong on this?
Michael, you're jumping to conclusions before you even read that. You want to be right so badly. You didn't read the part and other animals there.
Look,
hold on a second. Confirming that humans had butchered horses and other animals there 24,000 years ago. It says it right there, and you are arguing against it without even reading it, which means you want to be right. No, that's absolutely what's going on.
Because I have no dog in this fight.
Well, why didn't you read that whole thing before you started pointing at you being correct?
You published Skeptic magazine and you have no dog in the fight?
You're asking me, why don't mainstream archaeologists accept...
You should be skeptical of Clovis first.
Tens of thousands... Okay, call it whatever you want. It goes back 11, 13,
But what do you think
15.
about what that says? That there's evidence they butchered horses 24,000 years ago.
Okay, I would have to check the site on that. I haven't seen this article.
Well, now that you have seen it.
Not my problem.
Okay,
now that you have seen it.
But it is your problem because you're the skeptic
no
and you're here opposing this and you're saying there's no evidence. You haven't even read the fucking article.
Okay, I'm not opposing anything. I'm saying
you certainly are.
This is the reason why scientists accept these dates here, because there's lots and lots of evidence for
that is scientists.
10,000, 11,000, 12,000.
That is scientists.
Then you find one person that says 24,000. Another one, like 2 weeks ago,
this is not one person. This is very disappointing that you're arguing this without really doing any research about it.
And then
the article is titled "What Happens When an Archaeologist Challenges Mainstream Thinking." That's in the Smithsonian in the month of March.
Okay.
Jack sunk Mars. It was a brutal experience. Something that sank Mars once likened to the Spanish Inquisition. At conferences, audiences paid little heed to his presentation, giving short shrift to the evidence, etc., etc., etc. The result was always the same. When he proposed that Bluefish Caves was 24,000 years old, it was not accepted. What the Smithsonian are saying is now this is accepted. You need to get up to speed with the data, Michael.
Okay. My archaeology friends like Jared Diamond, who I just checked with on this, who's at UCLA.
Well, he certainly has a dog in the fight.
And he just says, here's the problem. For 50 years, people propose pre-Clovis examples or sites or evidence. They never hold up. The dating turned out to be incorrect. The carbon-14 was not calibrated right. There was this, there was that. They never hold up.
So essentially, you're quoting a friend.
It away for 50 years.
Well, you're quoting a friend who says the evidence hasn't held up before. Instead of quoting these articles with these scientists who are talking about the data that's showing that human beings butchered horses 24,000 years ago, you're disputing it just because you talked to a friend.
I'm saying that has to be confirmed. That particular
But
site,
why argue against it?
I'm not arguing against it.
You certainly were.
No, I'm just saying that.
Am I wrong?
I feel you were arguing against it and saying that it's not the case and quibbling it. And you seem to be, if I'm correct, you seem to be a Clovis first advocate. But put your reputation on the line and say you advocate Clovis first.
I'm not going to put a label on it. I'm going to say in the latest evidence that overwhelmingly shows humans coming across the Siberian Straits into North America 11, 12, 13, 14, 15,000 years ago.
That they definitely did then. They definitely did then.
And now
did they before?
What could push it back much earlier would be if they came by boat. Okay, so like where I live in Santa Barbara, there are sites on the Channel Islands that go back 11, 12,000 years ago, and they came by boat. Now the problem is well, if they lived on the shores, which is where the good fishing and eating is, those are underwater, and short of doing good underwater archaeology, which is hard to do and expensive, and most of it's probably gone, we may never know.
It's one of my beefs with archaeology, actually, is that 10 million square miles of the planet that were above water during the Ice Age are underwater now, and marine archaeology is still mainly looking at shipwrecks, you know.
Well, okay, they do that because it's like it's where the light is.
Well, it leaves a big unanswered question. At any rate, so for the record, can I at least say that you completely oppose the Smithsonian's position on this, that there has been no paradigm shift?
I will look at this. I haven't seen the Smithsonian thing. All right, I'm not aware of the horse find from 24,000 years ago. I am aware of the 130,000 year date from the Nature paper 2 weeks ago.
I have a slide on that too.
And if okay, but
I think the major speculation.
Show the stone tools. They're nothing like Clovis points. It's just a big like hand rock that might have been used. It might have been random.
Sorry, a big hand rock is all there is before 13,000 years ago?
No, I'm talking about the 130,000-year-old site.
130,000-year-old
you're talking about the San Diego thing.
We don't need to talk about that.
Why?
That raises interesting questions. Was it Neanderthals? Was it Denisovans? Was it anatomically modern humans 130,000 years ago? It raises interesting questions.
Or is it a misinterpreted site because they aren't stone tools?
I'm not pinning anything to that. I'm saying yes, that report.
The question is not necessarily just about the stone tools. It's about how the bones were shattered, and they believe the bones were shattered deliberately, indicating that someone was trying to get at the marrow. Maybe,
or a tractor rolled over it, a couple of years ago.
No one had excavated. That's just speculation on your part.
Not my part. This was one of the
immediately the find has been quibbled by the archaeological mainstream. Of course, it's been published by the archaeological mainstream too, and the rest of the mainstream is quibbling it. And we will see how that plays.
I thought you said that can't happen.
We will say what can't happen.
That the mainstream won't allow, radical ideas to
Nature published it, and the idea is being quibbled. And
here the Smithsonian
Nature certainly would not.
It's okay.
Nature certainly would not have published it if the evidence were not strong. I accept that. Nature's not in the business of publishing, fringy stuff. It is a radical proposal, but it's strong enough to justify publication in Nature. What's interesting to me is that the immediate reaction of the archaeological community is not say, well, what could this mean? Let's look into the implications of this. I mean, if there were Neanderthals or Denisovans in North America 130,000 years ago, we have a whole new scenario building here that really should interest everyone. Instead of the first reaction is, let's destroy this because it's really annoying, let's get rid of it, let's prove it's wrong, let's suggest that it was a fucking bulldozer or something like that. Maybe it was. I don't know. The work hasn't been done yet. But that instant sort of it's almost like an immune response to an idea that doesn't fit into the prevailing paradigm. But the other work, the work in South America, the Bluefish Caves work, that's really not controversial anymore. That's very widely accepted. Clovis first is a discredited and abandoned position. And I have something else to ask you, actually, concerning genetics and DNA. I'm sure you're well up on that. I mean, can you explain why we have a strong signal of Denisovan DNA in certain groups of South American Indians and in Australian Aborigines and Melanesians, but that Denisovan DNA doesn't crop up in North American Indians? How would we explain that if they all came through the Bering Strait?
I have no idea.
Well, it could be boats.
But I mean, this just happens to be something I don't know anything about.
Okay.
So part of the problem of even doing this is that...
It was your idea.
Well, here we are talking. This is good. But part of the risk is that you're going to find something I don't happen to know about. And then it's like, you see, I made my point. What point? Okay, so in like the history of the peopling of America, that area, there's always somebody that comes in with, it's, not Clovis, it's this, it's that, and rarely do they last. Why? The dates were miscalibrated or whatever. It's not just that scientists are closed-minded, although they can be. It's that the convergence of evidence isn't strong enough to overturn the mainstream theory. So, but it does happen. Maybe there are multiple migrations into North America and we just don't have all the sites. But when somebody comes up with a site like that's tens of thousands of years earlier than all the others that are accepted here, and it's over here, where are all the sites in between? It's like the gap, the 5,000-year gap with the Egyptian complex. Where are the sites? If it's true, they didn't fly there. So how'd they get there?
Well,
and there must be a trail, somewhere that we could find, unless they came by boat, and then that's evidence is gone.
Or unless you're dealing with 24,000 years ago and there's not much evidence to find.
That maybe.
But if they came by boat, then that clearly implies they had navigational skills. They had the ability to build boats and find their way across the ocean. And
big ocean too.
You can do the coast. That's not quite as. You don't need a big ocean going.
But you don't need an ocean going. But
I mean, this is one
also
hypothesis that's proposed, is that they came across by boat, just following the shore.
The same area as the Bering Strait.
You're just 100 feet offshore. You go in and
but most likely both, right? And one of the issues, of course, was the short-faced bear was so formidable, according to Dan Flores, that it would have been a huge impediment for people crossing on foot anyway. And the short-faced bear went extinct right around the time we see more evidence of human beings entering in. But why did it go extinct? That's the big question.
Well, you have to add that to the list of predators that there would have been no reason for humans to have been hunting.
Yeah, well, that's an enormous animal.
So there's sort of two factors that go on here. There's positive evidence in favor of a hypothesis, then there's negative evidence against the mainstream hypothesis. And you really need both. So it's not enough to just say, I don't accept the evidence for here. That's fine. Scientists do that all the time.
What evidence? Well, let's speak in specifics, because you keep doing this. You keep saying, well, they find things, and it turns out, no, that's not true. And then you're essentially proving your point of being a skeptic without having any real cases. Well, you just keep saying this.
All of the cases we're talking about.
But no, you're not saying. You can't say all the cases. If you don't want to cite anything specifically, don't keep bringing up things that are refuted, because you don't have anything that you're pointing to. So you're just muddying the water.
Okay,
you're essentially pissing in the pool.
No, the Clovis thing, for example. Gobekli Tepe, the pyramids. All of these...
What's been disproved?
No, okay, I'm making a slightly different point. That's
the problem, is that you're not addressing the actual issues we're talking about. You muddy the water by saying things have been tossed out the window, so we have to be careful here and toss these things out the window as well.
Not toss out, just contemplate them, published in Nature, for example. So let's watch what happens to the 130,000-year-old hypothesis. If it holds up, and there's other sites that are dated that way, and so on and so forth, and that will be truly revolutionary, and scientists would accept it. They would.
You see, the problem is that when you have a very strong paradigm like Clovis First, which really dominates American archaeology, prehistoric archaeology, for a very long period, it's difficult from a career point of view for archaeologists to come up and propose alternative sites. Those who did, like Tom Dillehay, like Jacques Cinq-Mars, paid a very heavy price for so doing. So the incentive to go looking for older stuff than Clovis is extremely low in the archaeological community as a result of this ferocious reaction that went on for 30 or 40 or even 50 years. I mean, also consider the Valsequillo excavations in Mexico, where there was a suggestion of some sort of human presence 230,000 years ago. I mean, that good archaeology, but it was utterly dismissed, and the archaeologists involved were ruined for getting involved in that. It's hard to see how that's a profession that encourages people to think outside the box. When careers get ruined and research funding gets withdrawn for an idea that doesn't fit the current mainstream hypothesis.
Certainly we don't like to think that scientists do that. They do that. Are you familiar with Michael Cramo's book, Forbidden Archaeology?
I know Michael, yeah.
Okay. So now, and he makes, in my mind, as compelling a case as you do. And for his humans were here tens of millions of years ago. And, his book is, 900 pages long.
Tens of millions?
Yeah, tens of millions, okay? And he's a Hindu. So his idea is, this sort of long recycling and
But what evidence is it based on for tens of millions of years?
I'm not here to defend Michael Cremo or to have a discussion about Michael Cremo. That's not why I'm sitting at this table.
I understand, but my point is that
Michael Cremo is not me.
That's right. So, but there's lots of alternative archaeology. This is where I began. There's lots of alternative archaeology books and
right. But what evidence is there that supports that?
None.
So why are you bringing up that when there's evidence that he's bringing up?
No, Cramo's evidence is similar to his. It's mostly negative evidence that I don't accept the date of this. There is this peculiar sort of footprint-looking thing in the mud.
Cramo refers specifically to the knowledge filter. The most useful thing about that book is the publication of reports, archaeological reports, which are no longer available to the public, which do suggest an alternative point of view. I would say it's a very useful book to read. Beyond that, I have nothing to say about it.
Right. So,
yeah, but that's not necessarily true. You're saying his only evidence. I mean, he's pointing to some pretty significant evidence. Like the Sphinx thing is a geologist from Boston University proposed this because of water erosion. Because of water erosion that could have only been done by thousands of years of rainfall, in his opinion, as a qualified geologist.
Right.
Like, that's not a lack of evidence.
I understand, but why do no other geologists or archaeologists?
There are other. No, that's not true.
Actually, they do, and I've had multiple conversations with Robert where he has cited the fact that he has gotten a considerable body of support from other geologists, not from Egyptologists, but from geologists who do recognize the effects of severe water erosion on limestone, carbonate rocks, and that's what we have there. We have a severe water erosion that appears and is preserved on the quarry walls around the Sphinx. The Sphinx itself, as Graham said, is difficult to ascertain because of all of the reconstruction that has gone on. But the quarry walls, which would have once had the very distinct stepped profile of a typical quarry, no longer have that. I mean, they have a textbook profile, parabolic profile that would be consistent with sheet flooding, which would be both dissolution, because carbonate rocks dissolve in acidic waters, and what's called corrosion, which would be the effects of water loaded with sand sediment, which would make it very rough. So if you've got the sand sediment flowing over the edge of what would have been a quarry wall, what you're going to end up with is a smoothing off of the rough corners, and the final result would be a very rounded profile like you see there. And you would also see where the fissures in the rock would be selectively widened and opened by the water penetrating those fissures. I mean, it has all of the earmarks of a very textbook case of water erosion.
Don't you think it's very disingenuous comparing that to someone who thinks that human beings have been here for tens of millions of years with no evidence to support it whatsoever?
Well, he doesn't say, of course, he doesn't say he has no evidence. He has a 900-page book full of evidence. It's the quality of the evidence.
Yeah, me too, Lordy. Like, I'm just listening and trying to absorb the information.
If it was that good, you know, we're not geologists sitting here. If it was that good, why don't geologists look at it and go, he's right?
But they do.
Well, they do. That's the point.
Listening.
They do? They all do?
No, they don't all do.
Okay,
some geologists who work with Egyptologists say that Schoch is wrong.
Okay, we have a geologist on the line. Why don't we ask him? Mark.
Well, we can have one guy's opinion. We could also have other guys' opinions that we can get from
this matter has been in the public domain since 1992. It hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
Schoch's argument that we are looking at precipitation-induced weathering on the Sphinx has not been debunked. It has been opposed. It has been disagreed with. But that is different from saying it's debunked, and Schoch stays solid and strong on that issue. He is a credentialed geologist. He is a professor of geology at the University of Boston. He has a right to speak out about this, and he stated his view. I happen to find his view very interesting, especially since it correlates with what I regard as the interesting astronomy of the site. I think that site has origins that do go back into the Younger Dryas. That's my opinion. I've stated it many times, and I've presented the evidence that I think underwrites that opinion. You and your colleagues are absolutely at liberty to disagree, and you do.
You don't think it's disingenuous to compare that to someone who says something that defies our current understanding of human beings and the actual evolution of humans?
Okay.
Like, you're talking about someone who's saying that human beings are how many millions of years old?
Tens of millions.
Tens of millions.
Yeah.
Well, we know for a fact, right? As far if you pay attention to evolution, right? But we weren't even humans
Joe,
a million years ago, correct?
I mean, there are creationists who think.
Okay, but we're not talking about them. We're talking about Graham Hancock.
I know. But my point was that, so here you have the mainstream scientists, and so it's like there's Graham. He seems so reasonable, but there's 50 like him, and each of them thinks that they're right. They're not.
There's your language. He seems so reasonable.
Right.
So you're right there. You're accusing me of dissimulation.
And you're
I
saying
seem reasonable, but
like
the subtext is that I'm not, and then there's 50 like me.
This is more
what a patronizing, arrogant,
no, I don't mean
deeply unpleasant and personal approach.
Graham, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it to sound like that. I really don't.
Okay.
Okay, I have a larger point.
Apology accepted.
When you're faced with a bunch of different alternative theories that are coming in, and it's like, take physics. I mean, every physicist, like you just had Lawrence Krauss, he gets these letters daily of people saying, I think I figured out why Einstein was wrong. And he can't address them all. And they're smart people, they're thoughtful people, they really believe it. What do you do with that? That's my point.
I feel that's not my problem. And if there are other alternative theories, that's not my problem either. It's the problem for the mainstream to sort it out and figure which to pay attention to and which not.
All right.
Well, I'm suspicious of the whole idea of the mainstream, because even looking in the mainstream, you find so many divergent points of view that I think that's basically a fiction, that there is this mainstream that has arrived at this consensus and that there are no ulterior motives there, and that there are no dogmas that are being perpetuated there. I mean, I look at a lot of the geological stuff and realize that there are many different points of view. When we talk about these floods at the end of the last ice age, there are many divergent points of view. There is what could be considered the mainstream, yet even that has multiple interpretations. And the same with the comet idea. I mean, I don't know what constitutes the mainstream there, because there have been a group that has opposed it at every turn. But at the same time, the group that accepts the comet hypothesis has continued to grow. In fact, there's even a number of individuals involved that set out specifically to disprove it or discredit it, who are now basically on board. And it has grown from being a small handful of scientists to there are now 63 scientists from 55 different institutions that are on board with the idea that something remarkable happened at the end of the last ice age. It was probably exogenic, meaning something from outside, something from space. There's no consensus as to exactly what that was, which would be normal, because these discoveries are in their infancy at this point. But there's been an attempt to discredit the idea simply because that as the evidence has come in over the last decade, it has evolved, and new mysteries have been opened up as the evidence comes in, and the claim is being made, well, there's no consistent interpretation of this evidence, and therefore we've debunked it.
I mean, an example is Pinter's Requiem, Pinter and Dalton Requiem for the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. I mean, they publish a paper in PNAS saying Requiem, suggesting that the impact hypothesis is already dead. That was in 2011. Every single one of Pinter's points have been responded to. Those who are critical of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis rarely cite the fact that the so-called refutations have themselves been refuted, that new information is constantly coming in. I see a very one-sided game being played here with a group of academics who are determined to demonstrate that there could have been no possibility of anything like a comet impact 12,800 years ago, and that these 63 or 65 scientists who are proposing that are just completely wrong. And when they refute the refutations, I very rarely see that referred to or commented upon at all. Again, your colleague Defant has dismissed the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis without actually going in detail into the debate that's gone on.
He has this graph in his paper showing all these different dates for these different...
That's from one of the critical papers. There's another side to this argument. So he needs to be listening to what the other side would say. Well, that's the point where maybe we should have Marc Defant come on, and maybe we should have Malcolm Lecomte come on as well, because Malcolm Lecomte is actually one of those 63 Younger Dryas impact scientists.
Well, explain to people that are just listening to this, what is this graph that you're showing?
Well, this is the carbon-14 date ranges from samples taken from the Younger Dryas boundary. So this is the boundary here, and the point of this is that there's not a single consistent series of dates that would consistently show, yep, absolutely for sure, at every site it comes in right there, is that they bounce around a lot here. So now maybe Mark, this is his area, he could come on and Skype here and
they
tell
bounce
us.
around, and what's the point of this for the lay person who's listening to this?
Well, so if you take the ones that are above the gray line, then those are showing that something like an impact happened much earlier or much later, and the ones below it are that it's much earlier. So where's the consistency of a single impact consistent across that middle of that gray line?
I don't think there's any argument there was a single impact. In fact, there's arguments that there's more than one date. We're talking about a stretch of thousands of years and multiple impacts.
The Younger Dryas runs 1,200 years.
Randall, please give me your because you're the expert at this.
Well, these are dates for the Younger Dryas. There's a big spread, obviously, but there's also a lot of possibilities for introducing inaccuracies into the dating. What's called the old wood effect can sometimes make it appear to be older than it is by a millennium or 2 millennium. But what we certainly do see here is a clustering right around 13,000 years ago. That looks pretty evident to me. And everybody knows who does radiocarbon dating that the dating might have errors and inconsistencies in it. The one article I think that came out last year by James Kennett and 25 others was the Bayesian chronological analysis consistent with synchronous age of 12,835 to 12,735 calibrated years before present for younger Dryas boundary on 4 continents.
That's a refutation of precisely what you're publishing.
It is. It's a refutation of this.
But Mark Defant does not refer to that refutation.
Jamie, could you pull up the age of Leo? I think I gave that to you. And go to slide number 167.
Wow.
167. And that refers to the, go to slide 167.
Jesus, you're not fucking around. 167 slides.
There we go. There we go. A cosmic impact event at 12,800 calibrated years before present formed the Younger Dryas boundary layer containing peak abundances in multiple high-temperature impact-related proxies, including spherules, milk glass, and nanodiamonds. Bayesian statistical analysis of 354 dates from 23 sedimentary sequences over 4 continents established a model Younger Dryas boundary age of 12,835 calibrated years before present, supporting a synchronicity of the Younger Dryas boundary layer at high probability, 95%. This range overlaps that of a platinum peak recorded in the Greenland ice sheet and of the onset of the Younger Dryas climate episode in 6 key records, suggesting a causal connection between the impact event and the Younger Dryas. Due to its rarity and distinctive characteristics, the Younger Dryas boundary layer is proposed as a widespread correlation datum.
And Randall, if I can remember what you said correctly, you believe that there was probably more than one significant impact over a period of several thousand years.
Let me pop in on that very, very quickly. I don't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead,
but let's be clear. The suggestion is that 12,800 years ago, there was comets break up into multiple parts. I mean, anybody who saw the Shoemaker-Levy 9 NASA films back in 1994 is aware that that comet broke up into more than 20 fragments, all of which hit Jupiter, sometimes creating explosions larger than the Earth itself. All right, so I don't think it's controversial that comets break up into fragments. And this is the suggestion of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, that we're dealing with a giant comet that broke up into multiple fragments, that orbits in the Taurid meteor stream, and that 4 of those fragments, that's the suggestion, 4 largest fragments, fell out of the Taurid meteor stream, coming in on a trajectory roughly northwest to southeast, crossing the North American ice cap, and there are up to 4 impacts on the North American ice cap. The impactors then continue across the Atlantic Ocean. There's a suggestion of impacts in Belgium and indeed as far east as Abu Huraira in Syria. It's a global event. 50 million square kilometers of the Earth's surface is within the Younger Dryas boundary field. It's a really huge thing. So the suggestion is that there were multiple impacts at the beginning. Now, the next question is what happened 11,600 years ago when the Younger Dryas ends and global temperatures shoot up incredibly rapidly. And the science on that is much less advanced than the science on the beginning of the Younger Dryas. Fred Hoyle, back in the 1980s, was puzzled by the sudden temperature increase at the end of the Younger Dryas, and he suggested, presciently I would say, that this may have been caused by a comet impact in an ocean. So maybe other bits of the Taurid meteor stream impacted the Earth, other filaments within the stream impacted the Earth 11,600 years ago, or maybe something else caused it. I mean, Robert Schoch is in favor of extraordinary solar activity being responsible for that warming. We don't absolutely know, but that's broadly the suggestion. We have the beginning and the end, certainly impacts at the beginning, possibly impacts or other things at the end.
Well, Klube and Napier and others, Duncan Steele and other astronomers have speculated that there could be impact eras, epochs, in which there's an enhanced possibility of the Earth being impacted, particularly if you have a large comet that enters into the solar system, begins to undergo a hierarchy of disintegrations, and basically litters the inner solar system with the material. And we do know that the Earth crosses the Taurid meteor stream twice each year, once in late June and once in late October, early November. And we know that the Tunguska event of 1908, which is not speculative, I mean, that happened. It occurred on June 30th, which would have been the peak of the Taurid meteor shower. It also came from the direction of the sun. Its its position in space, where it emanated, its radiant point in space from which it emanated at that time, was totally consistent with the Taurid meteor stream radiant. So it's very possible that the Tunguska event of 1908 was a member of that family of meteorites. And so, that would be, again, there's nothing definitive there, but it would be a prime candidate for investigation that perhaps, and again, I mentioned earlier, this goes back to the work of Fred Whipple way back in the 1940s, who began to research the Taurid meteor stream and came to believe that it was much, much more active in the past than it is now, that it's an old diffuse meteor stream that at one time, and like Graham said, it has multiple objects still within it.
Comet Encke is the best known.
Comet Encke is the best known.
That's a fragment of the original giant comet.
Of the original giant comet that they estimate might have been, based upon the amount of material still remnant in the zodiacal light cloud, that perhaps it was somewhere around 60 miles or 100 kilometers in diameter.
And another thing that I'm taken to task for is that I report the work of Klube and Napier and their suggestion that the Taurid meteor stream is actually fucking dangerous and that we should be paying attention to it, that it has been a hidden hand in human history in the past and that it can cause us trouble in the future. Now, this is not gloom and doom. We have the technology to deal with the large objects in the Taurid meteor stream if any filaments are on an Earth, an orbit that will result in impacts on the Earth. At the very least, it's extremely unwise of us not to pay attention. I'm accused of being sort of a doom monger and constantly predicting the end of the world and this and that, but actually I'm simply reporting astronomers who are very concerned about the Taurid meteor stream and the possibility that we may face further impacts from it in the future. That's not woo-woo, that is science,
Absolutely, and I would agree with that, and that is a form of catastrophism that scientists accept as very real. And
some do.
Well, lots. I mean, there's,
what, if anything, do you oppose about what they've just said? Nothing about the Younger Dryas period.
Well, so just on a technical question, your slide was 12,800 on there, and so Göbekli Tepe, the oldest C14 dates are what, 90, so 11,600. All right, so that's a 1,200 year gap.
Göbekli Tepe.
Catastrophe.
Well, no. Göbekli Tepe. To be very clear about the Younger Dryas, one of the puzzling things about it is that you have cataclysm at the beginning, and this global temperature slump is surely cataclysmic by any standards, and you have cataclysm at the end. You have a massive spike, a huge increase in global temperatures, and you have meltwater pulse 1b. You have a lot of water going into the ocean at that time. So both ends of the Younger Dryas are cataclysmic, and it's at the recent end of the Younger Dryas, 11,600 years ago, that we see Göbekli Tepe mysteriously popping up. And I know that you're a staunch opponent of Atlantis and that you believe Plato made Atlantis up in order to make a political point, and you may be right, but the date that Plato puts on the submergence of Atlantis is 11,600 years ago, 9,000 years before the time of Solon, which happens to coincide with meltwater pulse 1b and the end of the Younger Dryas, which I would have thought would cause you to rethink your position on Plato just a little.
Well, it's interesting. I'm open to the idea. I tend to read myths in the same way your guest Jordan Peterson does. That it's a story to deliver some sort of moral homily to us. It's a commentary on our own culture, our society. It's a literary way of delivering a message to people. That's how I tend to read. Instead of reading them like, let's see if we can figure out what happened historically.
But there's hard data. There's hard data in Plato's whatever you think it is, and that hard data is that the submergence of Atlantis happened 9,000 years before the time of Solon. That is a date. That is 9,600 BC. That is 11,600 years ago. This, to me, is a strong reason why we shouldn't just completely dismiss Plato's notion of a lost civilization of the Ice Age.
I'm not against that idea. I mean, the idea that, say, the parting of the Red Sea happened because of some impact.
That's not. I'm not proposing that. Please don't go there. I'm not. Waste of time.
Okay, but there are people that think that.
I don't.
Okay, or that the plagues of the Bible can be explained.
I don't go there.
By
waste of time.
Events. But
deal with Plato.
All right. So, but my point is that some of them may have historical origins. Some of them may be completely made up as mythic stories for some other reason. You have to take them one at a time. In my opinion, the Plato one is a commentary on his own culture of Athens and being too bellicose, being too warlike, and that this is not good for where we're going. That's my opinion.
And the fact that he picks a date that coincides with the geologically significant date of flooding it is not really going to change your opinion.
I think again that's
a pretty amazing coincidence.
Is it? I mean, we're finding a connection, not Plato. I mean, well,
Plato said there was an advanced civilization with advanced agriculture, advanced architecture, advanced navigational abilities, which was submerged by the sea, swept from the face of the earth, so that mankind had to begin again like children with no memory of what went before. And lo and behold, he puts a geologically significant date on that, a date that we ourselves have only known is significant in the last 20 or 30 years.
Mm-hmm. So where is this place, this Atlantis? I mean, so as you know, there's
not my problem.
There's a long history of people speculating. If we found a site, that would be a big plus.
Go do more marine archaeology.
Well, if we take it literally, obviously, then it's below the ocean. But I don't necessarily take Plato's account literally, but I do say, well, it's rather coincidental that his dating falls exactly on meltwater pulse 1b, when we know there was huge influx of water into the ocean. And also, if we look at his geography, it's interesting because he cites basically a landmass west of the Pillars of Heracles, which is Pillars of Hercules, the Straits of Gibraltar, and he places this essentially in the mid-Atlantic. I think it was Crantor, one of the commentators on him, that said it was something like 3 or 4 days sail west. But if you look there is a sunken landmass that sank at the end of the last ice age because of the rapidly rising sea level. And this has been well established by marine geology, looking at evidence that the Azores Plateau underwent an isostatic subsidence, which would have been resulting from the rapidly rising sea level. We know there's no doubt that the North American continent has rebounded isostatically after the removal of this tremendous mass of ice that mantled North America up to anywhere from 1,000 to possibly 1,500 feet. Well, if you do a comparable isostatic adjustment of the mid-Atlantic ridge, you'll find that the Azores island complex are much, much larger. And it turns out that might actually be a nice place to develop at least a maritime culture, something along the lines of the Phoenicians or the Minoans during the period of the Ice Age, because during the period of the Ice Age, the climate of the world was so much different than now. The Great Basin area was filled with huge lakes, vegetation, forests, savanna, and grasslands. Like Graham said, with the lowered sea level, there were much larger areas of the coastline that were exposed. And that's probably where most of people would have resided during the Ice Ages, near the coastlines, because that would have been the most benevolent place. With the rising of the sea level, all of that's lost. And there's nothing really fringed about saying, well, people might have lived on islands in the mid-Atlantic, especially when we know that those islands most likely had a benevolent climate during the Ice Age. So I don't go into, crystal technology and flying machines or whatever, all of this speculative stuff that has accreted to it. But if we just keep it simple and say, well, is it possible that a culture along the lines of the Minoans or the Phoenicians could have existed? Could they have existed on an island culture in the mid-Atlantic? And there's nothing really, extreme about that idea, in my mind.
Even the idea that a more advanced, sophisticated quasi-technological culture coexisted with hunter-gatherers isn't too strange. I mean,
we've seen that in the 20th century.
We do so today. We coexist with hunter-gatherers in the Amazon jungle who don't even know we exist. I mean, so I don't see why a priori that's just an impossible idea to look at.
Am I misremembering that you in your book you mentioned Indonesia as a site for Atlantis?
I mentioned Gunung Padang not as a site for Atlantis. That's Danny Hillman Natuwajaja, who is a geologist. He's Indonesia's leading expert in megathrust earthquakes, as a matter of fact. He has written a book proposing that Indonesia was Atlantis, and that Gunung Padang, which he's been involved in investigating, is a site from Atlantean times. Danny has proposed that. Now, what's interesting about Indonesia is that Indonesia sits upon the Sunda Shelf, and the Sunda Shelf was one of the parts of the world that was most massively flooded at the end of the Ice Age. I mean, if you go back to the end of the Ice Age, you're not looking at the Malaysian peninsula. You're not looking at the Indonesian islands going out towards the Philippines. You're looking at a giant continent-sized landmass, all of which went underwater at the end of the last ice age, really rather rapidly. So I think he has a point. I think it's an interesting, it's one of those areas in the world where there was very large-scale flooding. Huge amounts of land were swallowed up. Also, Sahel, the connection of Australia to New Guinea during the ice age was also washed away. There's a a whole range of issues regarding sea level rise in that very area, which anybody with an interest in these subjects should be paying attention to.
So it's quite possible that, like today, many of the advanced civilizations of today are on the water, whether it's New York or Los Angeles, and that was probably the case back then. And so the idea of Atlantis might not have been about one particular area, but many advanced areas that were wiped out along with their knowledge.
Yeah.
This is the thesis of that book I mentioned, Noah's Flood, that the two geologists with the Black Sea theory, that there were, it was rimmed with small villages, and, the massive flooding almost instantly wiped out, and then that gets passed down as, the oral tradition is these myths. To me, that seems totally reasonable.
Totally reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we get into more discussion about the actual impact hypothesis and the mega flooding, so that we can get our our guys on standby, get them involved.
What is your geologist, since you're by yourself and there's two of them, what is, it's only fair, right? What is your geologist opposed to what Randall and Graham are proposing?
I think it's the, on the impact hypothesis versus the multiple glacial dams that burst over periods of time, like that, I have that slide.
Okay, well, let's call him up and get him on Skype. And we've never done this before, so this might suck. Well, hopefully it'll work.
See, this slide here, he is showing these are each independent carbon-14 dates of these different instant floods in North America, from each individual ice dams.
And what separates these dates? Well, they're separated by...
Well, looks like from 20,000 to 12,000, so all before the impact.
Well, 12,800, wasn't that one?
So yes,
Mark's on the line. So it's Mark's on the line.
Yeah.
What is this, Mark? Mark, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Mark Defent.
Mark Defent, thank you very much for doing this. We really appreciate you coming on here.
It's my pleasure.
So you've had a chance to listen to these guys talk. What is your thoughts just stepping into this cold?
Well, first of all, I did not mean to upset Mr. Hancock. He seemed to be quite disturbed, and I want to apologize if I've disturbed him.
No, you haven't disturbed me, and I'm not upset. It's just simply that you're extremely selective in what you present in your draft, admittedly draft article that you've chosen to put online. You don't represent me accurately.
Let me go ahead and answer his question, because I know we're getting short on time.
No. We have plenty of time.
Okay. Well, first of all, would you allow me just to address Göbekli Tepe for a minute?
Sure. Would you like to address the article first? I think that probably would be the most fair, since we just brought that up.
Okay. I'm sorry. What was the question then?
Graham?
Well, I read out on air various passages in your article where you misrepresent me.
No, I did.
Sorry?
No, I didn't misrepresent you.
You didn't misrepresent me. No. Okay, so
in fact, you said that I said that that I was actually talking about someone in Indonesia when I said you didn't understand Newton's physics.
No, I didn't say. I'm sorry. I didn't say you were talking about someone in Indonesia. I said you were talking about Jesus Gamara in Peru is who I was talking about, and Jesus Gamara does have very exotic views on gravitation, which I state seriously are not my interest. I do say he may be right, but I don't say he's right. I say this is not my interest, and I go on to say what my interest in is his work. You pick on that.
You're drowning me out here. I was asked to explain whether or not I thought I was misleading, and I don't think I was misleading. You clearly state in there that maybe gravity was due to the way we've changed orbits around the sun. Gravity is not due to that. It's due to
don't state that.
Mass and the inverse of what do you mean?
I don't state that. Jesus Gamara states that, and I say I disagree with it.
Oh, come on.
I say I disagree with it.
I want to be respectful. I can't really hear you when I'm talking. I apologize. But I feel like you are selectively changing the meaning of what I'm saying.
Well,
okay,
why don't you quote me as these words from my text? When you say that I buy the gravity thing of Jesus Gamarra, why don't you quote me when I say
hold on.
This is just the opposite of that.
What I go on to say, not quoted in the attack, is the following, quote, however, this isn't the part of his theory I'm interested in. Where I feel he is solidly persuasive is in his observations of the anomalous character of the monuments of the Andes. I am not pinning anything on Jesus Gamarra's gravitational ideas. I am saying very clearly what it is in his approach that I am interested in. I'm not going to dismiss all of his approach because he has an approach on gravity that you don't like. That's not even of interest to me, and I say so in the book. You don't report that, therefore I suggest you misrepresent me.
Well, Mr. Hancock, what I brought up him for was simply to state that you didn't understand, and I say it right there, that you don't understand Newton's physics.
But I'm not even talking about Newton's. I'm not talking about.
If you don't understand Newton's simple physics,
I am not talking.
Laws of Newton.
If I wished to make an argument about gravity, I wouldn't go saying that isn't the part of Jesus Gamarra's theory that I'm interested in. I'm interested in the other aspect of his work, his observations through years of field work.
My point was simply to point out that you didn't understand Newton mechanics.
But I don't need
to
stop.
You're completely wasting time here.
Okay, Graham. The way the article
Michael,
is.
hold on a second. Hold on. Let these guys talk it out.
We did misrepresent him. We did.
Yeah.
The way the sentence is structured, it's clearly out of context. We're going to change that.
Yeah, I was taken out of context, and that's what I'm objecting to.
I'm not sure why he included it in the book in the first place, but he's not arguing about the gravity at all. So we will fix that. Maybe we could get straight to the flooding thing that Randall was talking about.
Graham is fine with that. I mean, Graham, I know there was something else.
Well, yeah, the other thing that I find to be misrepresenting is that the statement, yet Hancock makes the following stunning claim, quote, our ancestors are being initiated into the secrets of metals and how to make swords and knives. What Marc Defant does not tell his readers is that I make that claim. I don't make that claim. I am actually reporting what is said in the Book of Enoch. That's not me who's saying that. That's the Book of Enoch.
Graham, we'll fix that.
Okay. Otherwise, let's get back to the main meat of this, for God's sake.
Okay.
Just give me the list of things that, and I'll fix them. I will. We'll fix them.
Yeah.
Because that's not the point of that.
Well, Mark, you're obviously very critical of Graham's work, and maybe erroneously so. But let's get to what you think about what you've heard so far.
All right, Mr. Rogan. I don't want to come across as a pompous scientist. What I want to do is I want to protect people from these grandiose assumptions. Graham in his first, Mr. Hancock in his first book.
Please call me Graham.
Fingerprints.
Please call me Graham.
Okay, Graham in his first book in Fingerprints suggested that there was a continent where this civilization lived, and through some machinations, this continent went south and ended up destroying that civilization. Well, as a geologist, that's just nonsense. Mm-hmm. And now he comes back and he wants us to believe that he was all wrong. And then all of a sudden, it's okay now to believe in comet strikes to kill this famous civilization that's supposed to exist.
So, Mark,
this is duping people. I don't know if he means to do it, but he certainly seems to be duping people.
Mark, all my work is in print and online. I mean, I gather that you see your role as a protector for the public. Obviously, you feel that the public are not intelligent enough to make discerning decisions of their own in this respect.
No,
however, to address...
I'm saying that the public doesn't understand the science.
Okay, so
to the degree that you're misrepresenting.
So they need the superior knowledge of Marc Defant in order to understand it. Well, fine.
I think they need the knowledge of science.
Okay, well, that's okay.
Not knowledge that I have.
Let me come to your point, which is you're saying that I proposed one mechanism for cataclysm in Fingerprints of the Gods, and that I'm proposing another mechanism for cataclysm today. What I proposed in Fingerprints of the Gods was that there had been a gigantic cataclysm in the ballpark of 12,500 years ago. I looked at a number of possibilities, of which the most striking to me at the time was Earth crust displacement. And Earth crust displacement is reported, it's the work of Charles Hapgood, not my work, but I do report it in Fingerprints of the Gods as an excellent theory which explains the information. Since I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, I've learnt a lot. And I wouldn't want to defend that theory strongly today. I don't know if you have bought the latest edition of my book, the paperback edition of Magicians of the Gods, but it contains a chapter saying whatever happened to Earth crust displacement. I address the change of view in this, and I think I have a right to change my view, and I think it's healthy that, I mean, why would I stick permanently to a view that I hold in 1995 if new evidence persuades me that it's wrong? I'm sure that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And fundamental proposition is we had a massive global cataclysm in the ballpark of 12,500 years ago. So naturally, it's of great interest to me when a large group of scientists, more than 60 of them, over a period of more than 10 years now, present evidence of a massive comet impact event 12,800 years ago, exactly in the window I proposed.
Slippery. You are implying that there are a lot of people out there that believe in this. There are some people that believe in it, I agree, but for the most part, I think taking an honest view, the comet hypothesis has gotten debunked.
Well, that's complete rubbish, Mark. That's complete rubbish.
I would also point out that in Fingerprints, you had people believing that the end of the world was coming in 2012. Now, how am I supposed to take you seriously when you say things like that and then change your mind? We could all be dead by now if we believed you.
I have absolutely changed my mind on the Mayan calendar. I regard the Mayan calendar as an interesting technological artifact with a better estimate of the length of the solar year than the estimate that we have with today. The Mayan calendar is based primarily on the position of the sun amongst the constellations at the winter solstice. And we are in an 80-year window when the sun sits astride the dark rift of the Milky Way between the constellations of Sagittarius and Scorpio on the winter solstice. That window is 80 years wide. So the story of the Mayan calendar, by the way, isn't actually quite over yet. But I'm not pinning. I'm not.
Means?
Yes, I know exactly what precession means.
Okay, well, all of this stuff that you claim is on a precession. A precession is the.
Hello, friends.
Oh man,
I got some comedy dates coming up.
Got tired of all that bitching and complaining, so we're gonna do a little laughter. I mean, a whole lot of laughter.
Hi, thanks. I believe I lived there years ago. Yeah,
Oh.
I got the call. I got married years ago.
Oh.
So then I spent some time working.
Be careful, Trump might kick you out now. You gotta be super careful.
No, I already been out. Back in Europe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm representing this system, right? That is being developed by Scott Sonnen. Okay.
Oh, Scott Sonnen.
Yeah,
so it's like
Scott Sonnen is my
bells,
coach, right? Taffin Club and CST. We met each other a long time ago in '94, and then I was doing security contractor work. That was my line of business at the time. I've always been involved in training, martial arts, and any kind of such a training. And all the injury that I got from competing and normal weightlifting, and I've been lost contact with him for a few years, and then I saw him in 2000 coming out with the clubbers. The clubbers really attract me. It was different tools. And I say, okay, I want to get back in contact with these guys. I want to understand how can the things can help me. So I went back to him, and it blew my mind. Helped me to get back in the best shape of my life. I feel now I'm 47. I feel like I can move better, do things better than I used to do it when I was 20. So I promised him, I'm gonna make these things happen in Europe. You're my coach. You change my way to say fitness, and I'm gonna do that. So between my job and security, I was introducing this to my teams, and then I see changing on people being able even to just to go moving easier, and then transfer to whatever it was our training and handgun or whatever skills and stuff. Everything was easier. So I start to believe basically, and I start to say, okay, I want to help more people that I can. Okay. In my line of duty, in the Army, because I still have a different contract as a consultant in the Army back home, as a physical trainer, and sometimes also end-to-end combat training. And I start to introduce these things from basic, right? Because the system is very complex, as what Joe was talking about is all the mobility
Yeah, mobility is a big factor.
It's
a big factor because for so long people have just been concentrating on getting strong or getting in great shape. But I know people that are in fantastic shape. They can run forever, but they can barely touch their toes.
True.
And you develop these bodies that are severely limited in the amount of motion that you can actually get out of your body. In certain motions, you're really good. You might be explosive with a bench press. You might have a great run. But whatever else you're doing to your body, you're compromising all of your overall mobility. So over the last few years, there's been a tremendous amount of concentration and effort by a bunch of different trainers. Kelly Starrett, he's done a lot. Kelly's done a lot of work on his book, Becoming a Supple Leopard. An excellent book on that. And Kelly has a great Instagram you can follow too. And what he's done is he's done an amazing job in highlighting mobility and how important mobility and just having a full range of motion, which seems so simple, but it's not something that most people really concentrate on. Most people are concentrating on getting stronger, more deadlift, more bench press, more this, more that, but you're compromising all these different areas of your body.
Absolutely agree with you. That's from Kelly Starrett, right?
Yes.
The ball. Yeah.
Yes, his ball. That ball right there is it's one of those. I think he calls it the WOD Supernova.
Yeah, Supernova.
Yeah,
I got that one too. It's fantastic. And it seems like nothing, but when you roll around, you find the spot. You can release tension on your fascia.
Yeah, I put that on the ground and I do like bridges on it. I lie on my back on it and I put all my weight on that ball. For people just listening, it's a rubber ball that's like the size of a softball. And it's really hard, and it's got like this textured outer surface. And Kelly developed this to help. He also uses lacrosse balls. That's what he started out with. But I think that's a little bit better than a lacrosse ball.
Yeah, absolutely.
I take one of those everywhere with me on the road. Yeah. Every time I go in a hotel room, that goes in my bag, period. Like there's because if I work out and I get stiff, if I got something locked up, I need that fucking thing.
Yeah. That's what I have too in my bag because all the traveling flight, every time I get off from some flight, my infraspinatus, my neck, my lower back have the same problem. I find those things fantastic. Yeah, like you were saying, Joe, what were the things? Years ago, to take to a unit, like my community, working with the army or stuff like that, they say, oh, we're going to do mobility. They will look at you like, do we really need that? The old tough guy, they need to be, they're all thinking about, I need something to get myself stronger, faster. Yeah, but they don't get it. They don't get it if you don't allow yourself to regain the mobility that you're supposed to have. At one point, you're going to be stuck. You're going to be reaching plateau. You're going to get injury, and you're going to lose those guys in the field. That was my point.
Right.
And I think the system that the Scott created was smart enough to say, you know what? I'm going to introduce this slowly underneath because I give you the small amount of mobility, then what you want. When you want an high-intensity workout. Okay, so I give you that high-intensity workout. That's tag fit, high-intensity. But I'm going to teach you how to recover for the performance faster. And then I introduce a little bit of yoga. So you're going to feel better, loosen up when you're leaving. And day by day, those guys, they start to understand. And they start to tell me, you know what, we like the workout, but what we think we need is to be able to move the shoulder again, to be able to, carry my backpack again. And now everybody wants to do mobility more than workout because you can kill yourself in a workout. You don't need me to kill you. You just throw the days and decide a little bit of bar pull, a little bit of push-up, and that. You don't need really someone to drive you.
Yeah, people are understanding now that it's a huge deal, and yoga is huge for me. That's one of the reasons why. I mean, I still use that Supernova ball, but man, yoga's had a tremendous effect on my back. It's had a tremendous effect on everything. My overall flexibility is better than it's been in a long time since I was a kid, and I just feel better. Just feels like everything moves better. But you say yoga to people, and they go, you fucking pussy. How come you're out there doing deadlifts? You need to do fucking hill sprints. Everybody wants to do something that looks like tough guy stuff, that looks awesome on your Instagram. Right. Everybody wants to do deadlifts with fucking 450. But the reality is, if your body has any weak links, yoga will find those links.
Absolutely. You're going to show it.
Yeah, it'll show it right away. I was shocked. You know what the big one for me was? My feet. Mm-hmm. And this is something that Nick Curson said as well. Nick Curson, who's a really well-respected strength and conditioning coach, Speed of Sport down in, I think he's in Huntington Beach, somewhere in Orange County. But he trains Joe Schilling, Rafael Dos Anjos, Fabricio Verdum, big-time MMA fighters and kickboxers, and works with Aaron Pico, who's a top-level wrestler, and just a long line of, like, real high-level combat sports athletes. And I asked him, I go, what do you think that the one thing that a lot of athletes have that is something they need to improve on? He said feet strength. Nobody says that. Nobody says that.
True.
Everybody's like,
So
work on your cardio, work on your explosiveness. You got to be able to, fucking throw more kettlebells around. He was like, your feet. Like, think about it. Your motion. Like, if you can't move out of the way or towards your opponent, you're useless, right? If your foot's broken in a fight, you're severely limited. And one of the things that I found out almost instantly when I started doing yoga and when I started skiing, my fucking feet would be killing me. In the beginning, skiing was because my boots were too small because I have really wide feet. And so my feet would be smashed in there. And it sucked. And I was like, well, fuck skiing. I can't do it. My feet are too wide. And then I got boots that are made for wider feet, and they fit, but my feet would still hurt after a while. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with my goddamn feet? Maybe it's just because my feet are flat, and I'm just going to have to deal with that. No. As soon as I started doing yoga, now I can ski all day. Doesn't bother me at all. As long as I'm doing yoga twice a week, all that foot problems are gone. They're out the window because of the balance.
It's pretty funny because I was watching your flow video the other night before I came on because I didn't have – I wanted to be able to, contribute in this conversation. You guys are two-level geniuses for me. So if you watch his flow video, the first thing he put on some shoes with toes in them, and you're talking about the feet. Before you do anything, he started stretching his feet, and I could see him playing with his toes, and I'm like, I guess this is the...
I think it's what he was saying.
I hate to keep saying this, but this has got to be just pull it around.
Pull it around to me.
Yeah, right there. It'll be great.
It's the real thing, I mean, everybody don't think about it because we stand on our feet, so we think we're connected to the earth. We are not. We just, it's like I post this one on the table, but it's not connected. It move around, but it has no control. Right. Rebuilding the capability to grabbing the ground, understanding the stability of the foot, the mobility of the toes, and the ankle mobility is mandatory because I'm going to transfer power through my feet engagement to the ground, to my leg drive, to my hips, and to my core. So everything comes from the earth.
These shoes make everybody look gay.
Yeah, man.
There's no way around it.
Those shoes,
I love them.
They're very functional, but they're not sexy at all. I can tell you. I will never get married with those. For sure.
Well, I always know the real weirdos when I catch them out at night and they're wearing them. If you catch a guy like at a bar and he's wearing those shoes, that's a real weirdo. But there's people that do wear those. Is that your gym? What gym is that?
That's my XXL gym. Yeah, it's the gym that I'm dealing with, working with in Europe. That's my headquarters, let's say, in Europe. So it's my gym.
So this is all what we're looking at here. What's the name of this video, Jamie?
Flow Fit, yeah.
Flow Fit, Tactic, Flow Fit, Alberto Galazzi, Vibram, 5 Fingers.
Exactly.
So you sponsored by Vibram, or you just?
I'm an ambassador for them.
And that's a very low-profile one. It has a very small amount of tread at the bottom of it, right? It's very thin, the one that you got on.
Yeah, because they're different type.
Some of them are for trail running.
Yeah, for trail running and things.
Yeah.
I try to work with them to realize something specifically for flow, because sometimes when they have some rubber on the side, and for some specific flow, especially if you want to focus on your knee, understanding how my knee and my hips work, they get too much friction. So
why do you use that instead of barefoot?
I alternate it, like I said. I alternate it. If I want to really go freestyle, move around, I go freestyle. I go barefoot. There's no traction. But it's if I train like I do sometime in the concrete, I need something to really protect my foot a little bit.
Yeah, and dirt and rocks and stuff like that.
Years ago, you told me one of your biggest fears was getting old and feeling weak, and then you and I traveled a lot together. A lot of places we would go to jiu-jitsu places, and we'd see the jiu-jitsu guy, the main guy, and he'd be walking a little funny.
They're all fucked up.
Or he'd be, and that always stuck out in my mind, like, why love something so much if in my 60s I'm going to be limping or walking different? And I think this will help that, as you get older.
It'll definitely help that.
Really?
I think, that's one of the reasons why Eddie's gotten so into yoga, too. Eddie's doing yoga 3 times a week now. And he realizes it after he had back surgery. You know, I mean, when people get older in particular, you start realizing the limitations of some of the things that you're doing. You're putting tremendous stress on your body in very specific areas, especially jiu-jitsu. Right. You're attacking the joints all the time. You're attacking the joints, you're attacking your neck. And almost everybody that I know either has a back problem or some sort of a knee problem or a neck problem. It's just a constant issue when it comes to jiu-jitsu. And I feel like the only way to mitigate that is, first of all, roll with people that you know. Like people that you know, they're good people. They're not going to try to hurt you. They're not crazy. You know, like it's not even their fault. But young people in particular, like you get like some young 20-year-old kid who's all full of fucking just cum and just some little animal. They want to kill. They want to kill. Like a young guy, when they roll fucking full clip. And you could get a knee caught in a scramble and it gets ripped apart. It's just super common. So you got to be real careful, the kind of people you work out with. Make sure that people aren't going to yank on an arm bar or a knee bar or, you know, a heel hook or something like that. That's big. But also I think that improving your mobility, like there's so many times I would go to class and I would be stiff before I walked in the door. Like before I walked in the door, my back would be fucked up. I'd get up in the morning, my back would be fucked up. I'd be like, I'd just be stiff. And then I'd get in there and start warming up. But jiu-jitsu is so fun. As soon as you get in there, you just do a few movements. You start
cortisol coming in. You get, you know, it's an anti-inflammatory, so you're ready to go.
Next thing you know, you're like, all right, you slap hands and you fucking go into war again. And then you got a worse back, and then you got a worse knee. That's how I fucked up my back. I didn't just fuck it up in one thing. If I had that one incident that it got injured in, I could have eventually healed it. What I did was I just kept doing it. Even when I was still hurt, I would keep going. I'll just go light. I never went light. You still go back in there and go hard again, and then fucks it up more. I think that we have to be super aware that our body is a precious resource, and you got to treat it almost scientifically instead of looking at it like, you know, guys like to do curls and bench presses. I mean, how many times have you seen that where you see a guy with a meatball upper body with a little toothpick at the bottom that's holding him up with his legs? Like you see guys, there's certain guys you see at the gym and you go, you poor bastard, like what are you doing to yourself? Like you think everything looks good because you got these big biceps and big chest, but your lower body is virtually useless, you know, because they don't lift. They don't lift with their lower body. They don't do anything with it. You got to treat your body like it's a big old science project. Right. You know, like you have to look at it scientifically.
Like, when people ask me, what do you think? You know, what I think, what is the project? I don't know. I'm not gonna train you. I'm thinking always that everybody of us, we know what is our point B. So if I ask you, when you come to the gym, what is your goal? Most of especially young people, they know I know what is my point B. I want to become faster, stronger, leaner, whatever.
You're saying point B?
Point B, yeah.
Point B, right. Point A to point B.
Yeah, we don't really know what is our point A. We think we know, but we don't know. We don't know what's going on inside. We don't know about our hormone track, about estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, whatever. We don't know exactly how the fascia is mixed up with us, or the joints. If we don't think about that, we're never going to reach point B, or probably we're going to reach it, but going zigzag instead to go straight line, and we're going to face injury, plateau, go back to the, you know, losing power, imbalances. So
that's why I think
it's very difficult.
Something like yoga is very important.
Absolutely.
It highlights those imbalances. Absolutely. And it seems like this kind of particular motion, like your flow, like that up there, that would also highlight those particular motions.
I see flow, like for me at the beginning and everything. Why? Because you go through a little bit of joint mobility, and then you start to connect the exercise logically and connect it to what? Challenge your breathing. So also your breathing will tell you exactly when you're forcing your breathing through some of the movement, you should start to understand and investigate, why do I force through this range of motion? Probably something is stiff for me. It might be my joint, might be my fascia, whatever. It doesn't allow me to flow through one movement to the other movement because I'm working 6 degrees. I don't just work in a yoga mat, up and down, left and right. I just try to roll, jump, squat, whatever it is my body supposed to be doing. And I look like if you know the Magic Eyes picture. For me, the Magic Eye picture, the one that you look and then you step back and then you see.
Magic Eye pictures, right? Yeah.
For me, it's the body. You know, when I see you standing or do a couple of movements, I can interpret it yourself a little bit. But when you move freestyle, now I can understand exactly what's going on with you. Do you drop your knee when you're squatting? Do you know your feet is not connected? You cannot torque your knee when you cannot even understand loading one side, unilateral power, to one leg to the other. So for me, it's all information that, for me as a coach, okay, I start to plan out what should be doing, what kind of exercise, what kind of strength training maybe is needed for you, more stability or more yoga. Because until you are not ready, I will not let you lift or load your body if your body is not even able to holding your own weight.
Well, that's the thing. Most people don't know what their body's capable of doing. Like, and there's a lot of people that walk into any kind of a class when they start working out, and they might not even know what deficiencies they have because they've been overcompensating for that or compensating. You know, you might have like something wrong with your hip, and because of that, it's putting extra pressures on your knee, or you know, one side might be overbalanced. That's one thing you see with a lot of people that have done very specific sports. Like they're very strong on one side, and then the other side of their body's weak. And when you do that, you create these imbalances. You can get some serious injuries because of that.
Sure. And we take it for granted. You know, how many times you say, okay, my shoulder is in pain, but when I train, no. When I train, I'm good. It's already a senior. You know, you're training. What you're gonna do? You're gonna release the adrenaline and cortisol, and those are painkillers. They are supposed to make you stronger. You know, fight in the freeze or fight situation. That's what the endocrine system is doing to you. But after your training, it got even worse then. So you need to understand that. As a coach, you should be saying, you know what, we need to fix that. Because it's not good that you start training and working into the pain, because you're going to create more raw material that is not needed into your body. And for me, it's like to hold in this bottle. It doesn't weigh nothing. Today, tomorrow. But if I hold it for 1 hour, this is becoming heavy.
Right.
So we adapt to this kind of same level. They didn't change the level of the water in my bottle, but day after day, it's going to kill me. But people, they don't understand, because they say, oh, I'm used to do don't sleep the hour. I'm used to don't eat enough. I'm used to walk in this pain. That's not going to happen.
Now, what do you think is like the biggest injury that you deal with when you have clients or people that you're working out with? What's the most common? Is it shoulders?
Shoulder and knee. And shoulders more common those days, especially because we all grow up, you know, in an era that we all want to, you know, pack and shoulder and press.
Bench presses.
And I believe our shoulder is a complex joint, but it's not strong at all, because we are vertical animal. We are not like chimpanzees. It's loading, and if you see the structure, it's holding back. The horse can hold a lot of power on the shoulder. The human being shoulder is just dropping on the rib cage. It's so weak. And then the simple question is, how many of us can even stand on the wall with the feet on the wall? Some people that cannot even hold their weight.
You're saying to do a handstand with your feet on the wall?
Yeah, just even simple like that. And how many people, even with the feet on the wall, can do a handstand press?
Yeah, not that many.
Not that many. And if you ask how many of you, 10 out of 10, got shoulder injury, probably 9, they say, yeah, I got an issue if I've been involved in this sport. So it's so weak, because it's very complex. A lot of tendon, ligaments, multiple joints.
Do you incorporate a lot of hanging? I think hanging is something that people have been really concentrating on over the last few years for shoulder mobility and alleviating impingements.
Absolutely.
And people are listening to this. If you have anything going on with your shoulders, I'm telling you, grab a chin-up bar and hang from that thing, and just let your shoulder. It relaxes your shoulder. It stretches out your joints. And there's several doctors that stopped doing shoulder surgeries, and to alleviate pain, they've started doing hanging exercises and prescribing hanging exercises. It's amazing. Just grab a chin-up bar, start hanging from that sucker.
And it's true.
You know, he has the class starts at 12, but I go at 11. And it's not like a formulated class. I go back to the jump rope, and just to get oxygen power so I don't pass out. But Alberto will come back there like 11:15 and give me homework assignments, and they're always different, Joe. Like some days it's steel club. Some days I just work on my hands and knees, and we incorporate our hips. But some days he puts me on rings. The other day he goes, "You got rings at your house?"
Rings?
I go,
like gymnastics rings?
Yeah. I go, what wall is going to hold me? I mean, he's got the whole thing. And he just taught me one thing, because my biggest weakness is my breathing. From the sleep apnea, like I even got hypnotized. I mean, I got to go tomorrow again.
You got hypnotized?
I've been going to get hypnotized.
What's going on? What are they doing?
The sleep apnea.
You ever wake up with your pants down?
No. It got so severe. Mine was such a bad case. When my machine broke a couple of weeks ago, my wife had to go pick up the machine for me up in Canoga, and the guy was saying, "How's Joey doing?" You know, and he goes, "You know, that till this day, Joey came in here as one of the worst cases ever. Like, Joey was in bad shape. You remember what I was going through? Falling asleep on your steering wheel, and that sleep apnea, like whenever my heart gets going in jiu-jitsu, like no other place does my heart get going like that when I'm on the bottom. And at first when I joined jiu-jitsu, I overcame the panic attacks. So I had to just go, stand on the bottom. Like, I'd force myself to get on the bottom. I'd get like a, whatever you call it, a bridge or whatever they call it, a frame, and I'd breathe, and I overcame my fear. But the other fear I had was when I get too wound up, I can't control my breathing. It's when I would get up from the sleep apnea. So I kept thinking about something you said about on a couple of podcasts ago about a sports psychiatry or something.
Sports psychologist?
Some people have it.
Yeah.
And I did some reading, and I said, let me just go alleviate this last fear. I mean, how many fear? I got the needle fear, but last week I got, I still get that thing in my ear. She stuck a needle in my ear, the acupuncture, to take the fluid out, because my ear is not letting my left ear, the fluid out. So either they got to put a little thing there.
What kind of fluids in there?
Just from taking showers. You know me, I'm obsessed with showers. And I got to put earplugs in my ears when I go in the shower, and I go in there for an hour. When California had the drought, I go to Vegas, I get one of those king-size pin showers. I smoke a joint going there for an hour and a half. I write jokes. Oh, yeah, I love taking long showers.
In the
That's
shower,
my best material.
Really?
Yeah, best material ever. You can even practice it in there.
That's hilarious.
No, but I get fluid stuck in my ear. And last week I went to acupuncture, and she stuck a needle in there. And when she took it out, it relieved the pressure. Joe, I could feel the blood dripping down my face, and I could hear it hitting the pillow, and I didn't pass out.
Oh.
Okay.
So because I want to get these fears out of the way. Back to tactical fitness. The rings. He has rings, and Alberto taught me emotion that it's all about my breathing. I don't leave my ass on the floor. So I basically pick up my hips as a hip escape, and then I hold that breath, but I pull myself up, I stay there, and then as I alleviate my hips back is when I exhale.
Right.
And then my arms go down on that one. So it's a 2-point breathing thing. Dog, I do 3 sets of 10 of those. I'm on fire after that.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that.
Fire.
Breathing?
Breathing is gigantic.
Fire.
It's another thing that seems so simple.
Right.
It's another thing. You tell people, you got to do some breathing exercises. People go, I'm not doing that shit. I'm doing benching, bro. I'm going to build up my pecs, bro. Right? That's what people do. They don't think that breathing is difficult, but breathing exercises, this is what I tell people. Breathe in for 1 minute and breathe out for 1 minute. Tell me that's not hard. Just take a 1 minute breath in, look at a clock, and say, ready, go. And then breathe in for 1 solid minute, nice and slow. And then breathe out for 1 minute, nice and slow. You'll be fucking dead. You're not going to be able to do it.
Sure. Most
people can hold their breath for a minute, but if you tell them to breathe in for 1 solid minute, it's really hard to do. And then you go to like a yoga class and you take, yoga deep breathing, like pranayama exercises. Right. They're very difficult. And one of the things that when I first started doing yoga, like about 2 years ago, I really started getting into it again. The breathing exercises after class, when you're doing those breathing exercises, it was like my stomach felt soft. It felt like it was kind of weak. Like it would get tired doing those. I'm like, why is my stomach? I was like, I'm just tired from yoga. Like, why is my stomach getting tired from breathing out, like pushing air out? It's so simple. Like, I do, sit-ups and leg lifts and all this different stuff. Like, why is that difficult? Because it's a different kind of thing. And you're breathing, you're pushing air out with your diaphragm and your abdominal muscles. But now I can do it pretty good. But you get to like that Hickson Gracie point. I'm sure you've seen that.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Hickson starts pulling the muscles up in these weird ways and makes them dance.
And it's so connected. Brain is connected to your breathing. The heart rate is connected to your breathing. And people don't understand how it's important, to regain access to a proper breathing. Yeah. Even for people, they used to think, okay, breathing for meditation. I'm now into the holistic style. No, breathing is good for everything. It's help you to visualize what you need to do it, reset you can switch from your parasympathetic to the sympathetic in and out.
Saying? The what? Parasympathetic?
Yeah, nervous system, it's like if you breathe correctly, especially under stress, and you need to regain access to your cognitive presence, especially if you need to do something that is more complex, and you think about it. Some people, they're just thinking, okay, under the gas response, when my fight or freeze situation rises, and the situation is on, okay, I probably go to my gross motor skills. Yeah, but some people, like an advanced fighter and an operator, they need to go to access to gross motor skills and fine motor skills. Think about it, I'm going to run across this room, and I need to use my gross motor skill to run faster, but I need to understand where am I going to find cover and maybe shooting back to a target. So now you have fine motor skills on and gross motor skills. I need to be able to get my peripheral view on because I can't stay in my tunnel.
So wait, hold on. Because your English is tripping me up.
Sorry, man.
That's okay. So what you're talking about is big motor skills like running and sprinting, and then being able to shoot like a gun.
Absolutely.
And being able to like be very precise and very accurate.
And understanding, also interpreting what is the people is shooting at me from. So that's a complex, right? That's very complex.
So and do you have guys do that? Do you have guys like lift weights and then go or do like strenuous physical exercises, then go immediately to a range?
We do that. But also, when we start to, what is the importance of learning how to recover fast? To using the recovery breathing, like the tactical breathing, something like you were talking about. The Navy SEAL, they used to do a lot. 4 minutes, 4 seconds in, holding for 4 seconds, releasing for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds. It's a very basic way to learn how to get back from the high intensity to above your RA max to, let's say, 85%, something that you can bring you back to a cognitive presence so you can make the right decision. That's important.
What you tell people to do, take a 4 second in and 4 second out, so you're like slow controlling of the breathing.
That's the beginning of understanding, because when I be going, I need to start going into my nose and maybe taking a pause, go out through my mind, so that my heart rate would be
in through the nose,
down.
out through the mouth. Right. Yeah, that does seem to somehow or another slow down your heart rate for some reason.
Exactly, and that's when your heart is slow down. It's gonna give you a signal back to your brain. Oh, okay, now we switch. Now everything is under control, so you can make the right decision and you can get back to the fine motor skills if it's needed.
Right, and that obviously when you're training soldiers, it's got to be one of the most important things to do, to be able to operate under pressure and under like physical pressure
and make the right choice.
Yes,
because that's different.
The not panicking thing, right?
The survival response will tell you do the things that maybe it's more logical to save your life, but sometimes, like I always use this example, we're gonna cross the street right now. You're gonna cross, you see the car, you're gonna freeze, and then you decide jump back or jump forward, whatever is your response to don't get hit by the car.
Right.
But maybe that take like 12 milliseconds. And if you've been training more to that kind of alarm, you're gonna see the car and you wanna do, before you jump in and out, you're gonna look and see on the other side, because maybe you see the car, you jump back, you didn't see the car coming from the other part, and you got killed for the other car. That take a response of 300 milliseconds. So it's the amygdala will tell you to do whatever is needed to get out from the problem faster. But the long way of your brain response, if you've been training and you're becoming resilient to the kind of alarm and shock situation, you're gonna make the right choice. And for an operator, for a fighter, whatever, it's logical. Think about jiu-jitsu or chess game. Even those guys that play chess, they're so under stress hour, the brain is cooking, and the guys make a move, and maybe they are not playing, and just, I see the move, I say, I gotta move this way. The other guy is planning, taking more time to plan whatever is going on, because he start to understand why you did that move. So it's not logical for me, I should be going that way. And in training, regaining access to your breathing, to your heart rate, to your brain control is fundamental. That's why I believe we need to be careful and understanding fitness is so important. We can do a lot of things. It's not just changing how the way they look. We can help different people in different things. And for some people, it's life-changing.
Yeah, the ability to be calm under pressure is something that very few people have. And they just don't, it's not something that they exercise. They don't get to do it on a regular basis. They don't get severely stressed, so that when they are in a severe stress situation and they have to make a critical decision, or they have to use fine motor skills in a critical situation, most people are just completely incapable of handling that emotional and physiological load. Sure. What is it about? There's something interesting about breathing in through your mouth that creates like a panic feeling, like when guys are tired. What is? I don't understand. Like, it's a shallow breathing thing that happens.
Yeah, they try to take too much air in, I believe.
That's what it is?
And they brace. The problem
when
they brace,
they clamp up.
Yeah, we call it like a forced breathing. It leads you into that fear reaction, and so for your brain, it's why you're bracing. You're bracing when you don't know something, or you're facing something you're never expecting. So for my brain, my database is been there before. In your life, you'll be freezing for something, and then we bring you back. Okay, this is a fear situation, so your sympathetic system is on, and you start to lose control.
Hit that panic mode.
I think it's so simple. How many times you tight your lace shoes?
Right.
And sometimes when you're under stress, under something, you are a little bit losing control. Maybe we fight. We have a discussion, very intense discussion. And you can touch your lace. So that's already show you that you're losing control.
Yeah. Breathing in. One of the things that you really learn that, like during yoga class, in very particularly stressful situations, it's so hard to breathe smooth. It's one of the things that I've learned how to do is to try to concentrate only on my breath, and it actually makes the exercise easier, which doesn't seem to make any sense, because before I'd just be concentrating on the exercise, and what I realized somewhere along the line is my breath is not very smooth, and I'm not doing a good job of controlling myself. So now when I'm in a situation like a really difficult, like standing bow pose or something like that, what I concentrate on more than anything, more even than the posture, is just my breathing. Concentrate on big, slow, deep breaths. And I swear it makes it like 10% easier. Just concentrating on the breathing makes everything easier. And Chrome Gracie said that too when he was in here. We were talking about jiu-jitsu, and he's like, it's breath, man. Breath is everything. And once you can control your breath, once you understand how to control your breath, it makes those positions better, makes jiu-jitsu easier, makes everything better.
It's true.
Your breath, control your breath, Joey.
And you say the right things. You know what? All of us, we know how to brace, how to inhale. We're talking for half an hour. We never stop and do while we're talking.
But we're not under stress.
Right. We don't understand. When people understand, they start to do it. The problem is when people, they don't know how to exhale. If you're taking a man and put it under the water with the head, what is the last thing he's going to do before he die? Try to catch the breathing. So the body exactly know when it's time to inhale.
Yes.
But it doesn't know when it's time to exhale.
That's
under fear, that's we tend to force in the breathing.
We see people hyperventilate. Like my 6-year-old gets upset about things. Sometimes she hyperventilates. Like she just can't get it out. Like she's upset. Like someone did this to me. I'm so upset. And you got to go, okay, you got to calm down. I want you to take some big deep breaths. But it's hard to teach a 6-year-old that. You know?
Now, what the fuck do we do on stage for breathing?
Just talk.
I've never
thought about it.
Like, I started getting anxiety at the store. So now when I walk up to the original room, like on Tuesdays, or when I did the wool turn, I forced myself to breathe in and out of my nose. But for years...
You get anxiety at the store?
Yeah, in the original room. Since I've been back. I don't know. It all started the night I had to follow Morgan Murphy. I don't know. I went up there, and she was on stage, and I don't know what it is. I just get anxiety in the original room. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. And at the Wilton Theater, I walked out, and I looked that way, and then I looked at the audience, and it was like, woo, and I had to breathe a little through my nose. But what do we do on stage? Are we breathing through our nose, or are we breathing through our mouths? We fucking talk shit for 45 to an hour. I looked at the special that I shot, and I'm like, where am I breathing?
Yeah.
How interesting. We got to watch that next time. What the fuck are we doing up there?
Yeah, you're not thinking. You're just breathing. Yeah, well, you just concentrated so much on what you're trying to say that it all just comes natural. Just like right now. Like while I'm talking to you right now, I took a little breath right there, but I wasn't thinking about it. Right. I only need a little bit of air.
Right.
You know?
Because it's so natural for you.
Yeah.
You know? Maybe take me in a conference the first time, and I'm going to be shaking and go running into my word and then taking a breath.
You see that from people that are giving speeches. Yeah. You do see that if they've not become comfortable with public speaking. Public speaking is one of the most stressful things for some people.
Like number 2 or number 1 in some people's world. Like it's really bad.
Yeah.
I had one time a judge asked me, he was about to sentence me, and he goes, do you have anything to say to for yourself? And I had it written down. I had everything, Joe Rogan. I started squeaking. He's like, don't worry about it. Guilty. I couldn't talk.
You panic.
I couldn't talk. I went right into a panic when this little man looked at me.
Well, people get nervous, and when you get nervous, your adrenaline kicks in, and when your adrenaline kicks in, everything tightens up. It just... and physiological stress, like yoga positions, can kind of mimic that. Like when you're in a position, like when you got your hands over your head and you're leaning your whole body to the side, it's very hard to stay smooth with your breathing when you're in those spots. Like that's the number one thing that I concentrate on. Holding my body in that position is not nearly as hard as holding my body and breathing smoothly. Breathing smoothly is the most difficult part of that posture, like a lot of postures.
And as soon as you change your breathing, you start to change inside and you changing outside.
Yeah.
Yes. I see this happening a lot, What is the first reaction when you're under stress? Tension. But for if you look back what happened when you were in the I just say prehistory. Think about it. You are a prey. What you're doing, like any animal, like a cat in the road, they start to pump his hair up so to become bigger, right? So that's what we're doing. We growing our shape, so the predator might look at us like, oh, we're too big. I'm gonna attack a simple predator. We try to, our skin start to twiggling, something like we don't have we don't have hair, but we try to do the same, mimic the same.
Is
things.
that what goosebumps are? It's like your hair's puffing up to make you look bigger?
Under
fear. That's interesting.
And if I look in,
how come it's like that when you hear a good song?
That's a different feeling.
You get a goosebump.
It's like a lot of people, they misinterpret or they all thinking, okay, we go tactical training, we do this, and we can control fear, reaction. No, that's two different things. You can control when you are really under stress for that kind of situation. So heart rate, fears, and other things. Matter of fact, under high intensity workout, you become red. Under fear, you become poor. So it's different physiological things going into your body. So the only things that people do not is misunderstanding that doing some kind of high intensity workout, we can control also the fear, real fear, because real fear is another thing.
Well, one of the things you see with fighters is they perform better when they're more active, when they fight more often. So if the fighter fights like 3 times a year, they're used to fighting every few months, and they get that feeling of competition becomes a normal, natural thing for them. And it's also something that happens when you see a fighter lose. When you see a fighter lose and they come back, they're very tense, and they fight. A lot of times they fight different because they're now worried and concerned about the consequences of failure. And you see that fear, that tension, it's in their system, and then their whole mode of operating as an athlete changes because of that tension.
Because they didn't recover for the shock, for the situation they've been through.
Sure, and that's also one of the biggest factors when you talk about the difference between the way someone performs in the gym versus the way someone performs in competition. We've all known these guys that were phenomenal in the gym, but for whatever reason, they weren't able to win in competition. It's so common. It's with some guys, it's almost like it's crazy. It's almost like there's a spell on them or something. Sure. Like you'll see them in the gym and you're like, this guy's a world beater, but they can't beat anybody in a competition.
Why is that?
Psychological. It's all psychological. They are imprisoned by their own fears and doubts. They don't have the confidence to rise to the occasion. They don't have the confidence to perform under pressure. They can't just accept the potential failure. They're so overwhelmed and imprisoned by their fear of failure that when they get out there, they can't perform at their best. It's crazy because it forces failure. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy because they can't perform like they do in the gym. They can't just react. They can't flow. Like when you are fighting, when you're at your best, you're sort of just in this empty space. Like you're not thinking about the moves as much as they're just happening, and you're just relying on your training, and you're almost the best thing you do is stay calm, because as soon as you get emotional, as soon as you get aggressive, you might win being emotional and aggressive. You could catch someone and knock them out, but you also might get knocked out yourself. You might do something that's not smart, like when you're talking earlier about playing chess. Martial arts is in a lot of ways very much like chess, but way more complicated because your physical consequences are so severe. So there's all this fear. It's not just about losing. It's about getting hit, and that punishment of physical consequences is just so significant. It's so much different even than in jiu-jitsu. Like jiu-jitsu, the physical consequences are tapping and losing, and those are terrible, but it's nothing like getting kicked in the face or getting one of those Yoel Romero flying knees to your head. That kind of fear that's an overwhelming fear, and for some people they throw up when they're in the locker room and they panic and they get so scared they just can't perform under pressure.
If you transfer this also to some of the operators, some of the operators that literally dump.
When you say an operator, you're talking about
special
soldiers,
forces,
special ops guys.
They're tough, they are super guys, they are
right.
I'm amazed by those guys, and they just chapeau, But it's natural, you know. They say, you know, during the task, I might be shitting in my pants, you know. But it's physiological. It's physiological, and so then you keep going. Then you keep going.
Just keep going with shit in their
because
pants.
that's a physiological reaction to the kind of stress factor. Your body wants to get lighter to fight back faster or run away or whatever. Yeah. So it can't control. You know, there's nothing to be ashamed about it.
You see it with animals as well. I mean, there's a famous video of these two bears fighting, and as the bears are fighting, they're shitting all over the place. As they're fighting, they're shitting.
I love watching movies like Collateral or something when people go into some place and they shoot a place up and people's reaction, how they run. That's not usually the case, bro. I've seen it. People drop to the fucking floor. People drop without even getting shot. They don't know what. You just freeze.
Yeah.
The sound of you being somewhere and being transferred to the sound of gunfire is fucking overwhelming. And some people get it and react to it, and some people just think it's the 4th of July.
Yeah.
You know, it's really weird, but I've seen people fucking drop from fear.
Yeah.
Drop from fear. Something that I was as a child, and I was 2 blocks away from, just people dropping from fear. You know, it's so, like I remember when I lived in Aspen, they have the ESI Bodyguard Academy in Aspen.
Yeah,
what is that?
I know that.
What is it? What does ESI stand for?
Vintage.
I don't know, but the guy supposedly was in a room, 6x12 room, and he killed 12 Mexicans at night point with his bare hands. So he opens up this ESI thing, and it's, you know, it's 20 G's. You know, it's a summer long program, and you learn how to adjust up at the high altitude and drive and evasive driving and shooting. Then they have a course on maritime, how to defend people out on the ocean and all that stuff. But see, Aspen and all those places, like Woody Creek where you went, is home to the baddest retired soldiers in the world, and you don't know who they are. You just think that dude over there with the American flag is mowing the lawn. That guy killed 80 people with one hand in Vietnam.
There's a guy in Denver that I know.
I'm telling you,
amazing.
Colorado is where they put them.
Why? Why do they put them in Colorado?
Because the mountains, to keep them away from civilization for these people. Just in case they hear Chinese music somewhere on the street. They don't ever want that to happen, okay?
Break glass in case of war.
And there was a guy that came in that was a Marine that, bro, Joe, you know, anybody comes in with stories, I know one thing. When I see it, I believe it. The motherfucker used to get picked up at Aspen Airport in a helicopter.
Yeah.
Like they sent like a helicopter with 2 guys jumping out, 4 guys around them, and he would just wave at Uncle Joey. I was 19. And he would tell me stories about, you know, the Green Berets and all these guys were sitting around a thing cooking chili, and they were all telling how many people they killed. I killed 18. I killed 22. Meanwhile, he was stirring the soup with his dick over the fire. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the type of stories this guy would tell me. He had me all fucked up in the head. And I asked him once, I go, should I go to that ESI? And he goes, listen, I'll go in there and smack them all with my left hand. He goes, first of all, you can't teach what you need to learn over there. Because 4 years of Charlie in the bush is a lot better than 12 weeks of you hanging out with some white dudes with suits shooting people, targets in the mountains.
Yeah, it's not real.
It's not.
Until there's real consequences.
So that's why he said it just wasn't.
Don't you think, though, it's better than nothing? I would think that it's better than nothing. I would think that the best thing would be actually being in boot camp, actually going to buds, actually being in some sort of a situation where you realize this is life, this is real. Whereas if you're preparing like up and you're just going through that course,
right?
You might have some things in your mind, but that's one of the things like people say to me, like should I take a self-defense class? Like when they show you how to kick somebody in the knee, I go, listen to me, that shit is not gonna, like, there was this guy on the fucking radio that was he was always talking about it was on Opie and Anthony show back in the day, and he was always talking about there's a difference between the street and martial arts. There's martial arts and tournaments. There's rules. In the street, there's no rules. And I'm like, I fucking hate when people say that kind of shit. Because listen to me, the stuff that works on trained killers is the real shit. And if you think that you're going to come in and you're going to throw some fucking karate chop at someone's balls and you're going to somehow or another be able to stop Anderson Silva from kicking you across the room, you're out of your fucking mind. You're out of your mind. First of all, you're not going to karate chop his balls. He's not going to let you get close enough to him. And if he does let you get close enough to him, he's going to strangle you. and you're not going to be able to do a goddamn thing about it. You're going to be 100% helpless. So these ideas that there's this shortcut, and the shortcut is like street defense. There's certain pressure points around your neck. I could attack that, and you will be helpless. No, you're not going to get my neck, you fuck.
Let me grab your finger.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that guy from the fucking store. There was a guy at the store who used to pinch down on this is the biggest phony I've ever met in all my years of meeting phony martial arts guys. He used to pinch down on your thumbnail. He was like, there's a pressure point on your thumb.
Oh, yeah, right.
Like, motherfucker, dudes lie on me with their knee on my neck. Like, they'll put all their weight on your neck to try to get you to give up the armbar. Like, if you're in a situation where you're defending it's an armbar and the guy's on top of you, guys will put their fucking knee, a 230-pound man will put his knee on your neck while he's trying to, and he'll put all his weight on it. And you're not tapping from that? You think I'm going to tap from a thumbnail?
It's funny. I saw people try to get into the Special Forces community. I tried to teach them
pressure point.
I said, do you realize this guy's wearing bulletproof jacket and vest and plaid and all the material? You're not gonna even have access to the body. It's crazy. Man. It's crazy, mate.
There's so many stupid martial arts courses. I mean, it's so fucking dumb. It's so dumb. There's so many these ridiculous ideas that you're going to be able to defend yourself with some tricks.
Yeah. But you were saying in the car, people that love these things, like you're gonna have 6 packs. Yeah. 10 minutes training a day in 6 weeks or whatever.
Late night infomercials. Yeah.
People love that.
You only have 15 minutes, but 15 minutes is 2 minutes too much. 13 minutes is all you need. 13 minutes. All you need is 13 minutes. You're like, wow, that's what I've been waiting for. I want to be shredded. I want to look great in the beach. 13 minutes. Fuck the fuck out of here.
We've had a civilization of just these things, big dick pills, which you go to just things that
quick fixes.
If you stay up past 1, it's all attacking men's testosterone level. I don't know what it is about people after 1. I'm fucking tired all the time. Yeah, so we're sleeping.
Yeah, but those guys that are up late at night, they're just like half out of it.
That's all they.
Resistance is down.
Do you have more sex drive? I mean, they just sell you some fucking bill of lading, whether it's the big dick pills or the 6-minute workout.
Yeah.
And then they keep beating each other like by 1 minute. We have the 5-minute workout. And you know what, man? Half of America buys into that.
A lot of America buys into those fat pills.
That's the sad thing.
And once again, if you want to go back to what we discussed before, it's not about also, your breathing. I mean, how comfortable you are in the situation. And I always give this example. I believe I've been there. I don't know you guys, but sometimes you desire to date someone so badly, and you get so excited when you get it. And the first day that you go, you feel like you cannot even move. You panic. And if you get to have sex that day, it doesn't work the way that you want. You pray that it's gonna work, but after you pass the first shot, the second, the third is become better. It's exercising and breathing control is all the same. Once you get used to everything, comes. It's so comfortable.
That's a big thing with again what we were talking about with fighting. When I had one time where I tore a muscle and I didn't compete for like 6 months. It was like the longest time I'd ever gone without competing because I tore the muscle that connects the groin to like I think it's called the sartorius muscle. Mm-hmm. It's like at the top of the leg. It was real bad. I couldn't throw any kicks at all. I could only do my workouts in the pool. It was pretty bad. And so when I was recovering from that, when I got back in, my first fight back, I was like, wow, it just feels so off. My timing feels off. Everything feels weird. But then I fought again less than a month later, and I felt great. Like less than a month later, everything was like, all right, I know this again. This is my thing. I've been here before. And then it felt normal again. It's like when you have a girlfriend. If you have a girlfriend for a long time, you don't get nervous about whether or not you're going to get it up. You don't panic like, I hope she likes me. She fucking likes you. She's naked. She's right there. She's been with you forever. You know she likes you, so it's not an issue. But if it is like you said, a girl that you've been thinking about for the longest time, and I'm going to ask her out. Hope this goes well. And then you finally get where they're like, yikes! It's like there's so much panic, and the human penis is such a fucking odd thing in that regard. regard. You know, that's like, what a bizarre thing. It's designed to make sure, like, look, dude, if you ain't calm, you're not gonna fuck, okay? Because we don't want any weak ass, nervous bitches out there making babies. So the system is built to make sure that your dick does not get hard if you're fucking panicking. It's not like a rhino horn where it's armed and ready at all times. No, it's like a very specific physiological process has to be in place where the softest part of your body becomes hard like a fucking rock. Like that, the process itself is crazy. When you look at your dick when you're going to pee, and it's this soft little spongy thing, and then you grab your dick when it's at full mast, and it's like, how is that the same thing? Because it's this crazy physiological process that only works if you're ready to rock.
Right.
You can't be faking it. Like your body knows if you're panicking.
Right. There is a book. There is a book. I don't know how you translate it in English, but there is a book that explains it so well. It's so simple about those reactions of the body under stress. And you say, think about the zebra on the savannah. You know, that's exactly, you know, when someone is chasing you to hit you, and when you are under stress, high stress, your body stops producing hormone like testosterone. Why? The last thing you want to have is sex when some lion is behind you. So that's exactly what he's doing. It's shutting down whatever is needed.
Shutting down everything. Yeah.
So it's under stress. You know, when you are freaking out, you can't perform. You can't perform. You're not relaxed. You're not confident. You know, it's not.
Zebras are so bizarre because you see the way their body looks. Like they're not camouflaged at all. Like they have white with black stripes on.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, they thought that the white with black stripes on would confuse an animal's mind. Like, there's a type of camo. Have you ever heard of ASAT camo as a type of camouflage? It doesn't look like trees or anything. It's just a bunch of black and brown lines. And those lines for animals, because animals, their eyes operate on edge detection. They operate on a lot of them, especially prey animals like deer and things along those lines. They see movement. They don't necessarily see things the way you see things. They mostly just see movement. And so for the longest time, they thought, well, maybe when you're looking like a lion is looking at a zebra, the lion is seeing this zebra's body, and there's all the lines confused so he can't see it. Then they realized, no. What it actually is you can't pick out individual zebras. So, like, if an individual zebra looks different from the other zebras, that's the one they get after. Yeah. Like if one zebra's bleeding and has blood on its body and it looks different from all those other white and black lines, that's the one they target, which is kind of fucked. And one of the ways they found out this, they tagged a zebra. They put like an ear tag on a zebra, and they sent, Jordan Peterson was talking about this recently in this video, and they put it back into the herd, and the lions immediately killed that zebra. That's the one they went right to because it had something different. Like, you see all these white and black lines, and then, this motherfucker's got an ear tag. Get him!
That's
and they
crazy.
just went right after that. So it's really designed like, look, we know we're fucked. We're born fucked. But if we stay together, you know, maybe, look, when you see that. So when you see all those zebras together, it's super confusing. Well, we will have this fucking TV fix soon, I swear. This TV cuts in and out. That one, you can see it back. So when you see these zebras and we see these lines, what it's designed to do is confuse the lions so that they don't know which one to target, which is crazy. But if one of those motherfuckers had an ear tag, a big old yellow tag hanging off their ear, the lions would be like, there you are, bitch. I see you.
That's kind of cool.
It's fucked, though. I mean, what a terrible situation nature has given these poor things. Yeah. The lions are camouflaged. The lions look like the brown grasses, you know?
Sure.
And tigers, apparently, that whole stripe thing with them is also to make them blend in with all their surroundings, all the trees and the sticks. You know, they live mostly in the jungle.
Sure.
So you were asking me before this about the fights.
Yeah, that's
how
What do you think? Because when they were counter-starker, that's why they keep the distance, and they know exactly that's...
This is what I think. A lot of people were like pissed off. It was boring. But I think that's because they just want to see people beat the fuck out of each other, which I understand. That's why you tune into cage fighting. But to me, the way I always describe martial arts is it's high-level problem solving with dire physical consequences. And if you run in on Tyron Woodley, you got some dire physical consequences. He's a fucking powerhouse. And if Woodley charges at Thompson, there's dire physical consequences because he was getting tagged. When he said it to me after the fight, he's like, he caught me a few times as I was charging towards him. So Woodley has a different style than Thompson. Thompson has that wide stance, that karate style, and he's excellent at moving in and moving out and almost like point fighting you.
Right.
He's just jabbing you, hitting you with these clean left hands, sliding out of the way, occasionally throwing kicks, but mostly what he's doing is making you wonder what he's going to do and when he's coming at you. And Woodley had to pick his battles and figure out when he could launch himself at him. So at any moment, something could have happened. But a lot of shit didn't happen. Right. So the people watching at home are like, that was the most boring fight ever. It's because those moments are so critical. Those moments are so dangerous. You can't just... They would like it to be like Frankie Edgar Gray Maynard, just fucking chaos, punches throwing, wild. It's not going to happen like that. You can't do that with Wonder Boy. You can't charge at him like that. He will fucking counter you, and you'll be one of those people on his highlight reel. So Tyron Woodley was very smart, and that he knew that he couldn't charge at him. And Wonder Boy... He's not going to charge at Woodley either. I mean, he got almost knocked the fuck out in the first fight. He almost got knocked the fuck out in the fifth round of the second fight, too. Yeah. Woodley's a powerhouse, man. He hits so goddamn hard. So everybody had to be on their toes. They both had to be minding their P's and Q's. And that translated for a boring fight to a lot of people, but not to me. To me, I was like, anything can happen at any moment. In the fifth round, it almost did.
Almost did.
When Woodley connected and Thompson's knees went out, I mean, he slumped. He was out, man. He was out for at least a half a second or a moment, you know. There was a moment where his legs gave out, his body went limp, and they could have stopped the fight right there. I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad they kept it going. I talked to Big John McCarthy in the cage after the fight. I go, how close were you to stopping that fight? He goes, I wasn't close to stopping that fight. I go, well, you were looking, right? He goes, I was looking. I go, you were looking close. He goes, I'll never admit it. I goes, but it was, I mean, he was almost out, right? He goes, he was almost out. He might have been out for a half a second, but I gave him a chance. I go, he did a great job. He did an amazing job. I mean, that's why Big John McCarthy's so important, a guy with that kind of experience. And if he fucked that up, everybody would be so mad at him. But he did it perfect. It was perfect. He has the most difficult job in the sport other than the fighters. Fighters have the most difficult job. Second most difficult job is the referee. Third most difficult job is the judges.
Yeah, I believe so.
I think so.
Yeah, I believe he's going to interpret trauma before the other people.
Well, he has to be at the right angle. Right. Like, they're moving around and they're fast and they could go to his left and he could be over here, but something could be happening on their right and he doesn't even see it. You know, you don't know. Like, sometimes guys don't see taps. Sometimes guys don't see certain eye pokes or groin shots. There's a lot of things that can happen. A referee's job is insanely difficult, and they only get praise when they fuck up. Right, or they only rather get attention when they fuck up. They don't get any praise when they do a great job. And just they need more. You know, they need more. More people need to understand, like, how difficult that is. So that moment where Tyron finally did connect on Wonder Boy, and everybody's like, why didn't you do that earlier? Because he could have got knocked the fuck out. Like, that was where the opening was. Woodley was so aggressive because he was down on the scorecards, at least in his corner's eyes, and in my eyes he was as well, and he had to charge forward, and he had to connect, and he did. But to make that happen, a lot of things have to be in place. You have to understand Wonder Boy's timing. He had been fighting him for 4 rounds already. He was getting a sense of what Wonder Boy could and couldn't do. He also knew the consequences. He'd been tagged a couple of times. Right. So he knew, like, I can't just rush at him, because Wonder Boy was trying to time him with that right hook. He was standing in the southpaw position with his right leg forward. He throws that front leg side kick to the body. He throws it really well because he picks it up from the ground, like, low, and it sort of scoops up, so you don't see it coming until it's too late. It might not be the most powerful application of the front leg side kick, but it's very sneaky because he slides in with that foot low, and then it comes up and stabs you, and you don't know if it's going to come up as a side kick or if it's going to go up and over your shoulder as a round kick. You don't know what he's doing. He's so sneaky. So Tyron had to be very cautious, and for a lot of people, it was very boring because of that. Mm-hmm. But I didn't think it was boring while it was happening. I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, there's going to be moments when the shit starts flying. And in those moments, that's where the fight becomes amazing. But those guys are smart. they're not dumb, and the belt is so goddamn important. When you have the belt, you get to decide. You fight all the best fighters. You make the money. You know, you get the opportunities for the big money fights, like the Conor McGregor type fights. Those only happen if you have the belt. If you don't have the belt, nobody gives a fuck about you. So for a guy like Tyron, man, that belt is everything. For a guy like Woodley, or a guy like Wonderboy, rather, that belt is everything. If you don't have that belt, you make a fraction of what you make. Like, think about that fight. That fight's insanely close. It was so close. Dominic Cruz afterwards said, that's basically the same fight as the first fight.
Right.
It's like you could call, if you've called the first fight a draw, you could easily call this fight a draw. And I agree with him. So that means that Wonderboy and Woodley are essentially like so closely matched stylistically that it's a wash, right? But meanwhile, Woodley's the one who's the champion. Woodley's the one who has the potential to fight Conor McGregor. Woodley is the one who has the potential to fight Michael Bisping or who else he fights at whatever weight he fights at. And that is where the money is. Right. So he's the guy who's going to get the money. Whereas Wonderboy, who essentially had a draw with him, proved that he was at least close enough on one fight and just a hair under on the second fight. He's going to make a fraction of what Woodley makes, likely. Mm-hmm. So those consequences have to be taken into consideration when you're watching these guys fight, is that they know there's a win bonus and there's a loss. Like, if you lose, you get your show money. You don't get a bonus. But if you win, you get twice the money. Like, a lot of guys have the way their contract is structured, they'll make X if they win, and they'll make X plus X. They'll make X plus X if they win, but if they lose, they only make X. So they might be getting $200,000 for the fight, but another $200,000 if they win. That's a giant swing. That's a big deal. So they have to be really fucking careful they don't make mistakes. I don't like win bonuses, man. I don't like it. I think those guys are trying to win anyway. They're trying to win. I just think, like, especially in particular in situations like that, when fights are like that fucking close, like a judge can decide whether or not you make an extra $200,000 or don't. Like, that seems crazy to me.
Right. Are you still training?
Yeah,
I saw you boxing. Yeah. I saw you boxing a few weeks ago, right? You posted a video.
I'm back doing jiu-jitsu again too. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, I was working on heavy bag last night at the Alberto Crane Academy. I was night. I came back from Ventura. I was teaching a workshop, and I need some let go something. I didn't want to lift weight. I saw the dojo empty. Heavy bags, gloves. I said, all right, let's go.
Yeah,
that's cool, man.
Well, heavy bag, I think, is everybody would do better if they had a heavy bag in their garage.
Yeah,
just go out there and hit that thing. It feels good. You don't even have to have great form. Just go out there and hit it. It's so good for your body to just explode and just release tension and stress. Right. And for people who have like joint issues, they have these water bags. It's essentially like a thick layer of the outside is like a thick layer of padding, like a few inches of pad of foam, and then inside of that is a water bladder. It's filled with water. So when you punch it, it's like whoosh, your arm goes into it. But you could really dig in and hit it hard, but it doesn't have the same impact like on your joints. You don't feel it so much on your elbows and your shoulders and stuff because there's give to it.
It's creativity. I mean, once in Sicily, you ever been in Italy?
Yeah. That was it. The first time last year I went to Italy.
Cool,
Loved it.
You like it? Where have you been?
Man, I went to Rome.
Nice.
Went to the Vatican. Saw the Vatican. We went to what is the mountain area?
Dolomite?
No, God damn it.
Alpine.
It was out near where the volcano killed everybody, Vesuvius.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we went there, and then we went to the Amalfi Coast.
Amalfi Coast.
Yes,
down
that's
to
where
Naples.
it was.
It's beautiful.
Oh, man.
It's amazing.
So beautiful. It didn't even seem real. It seems like you were in front of a green screen.
It's crazy.
Like, you look out, you have to go on this mountain road. It's crazy, Joey. It's a road that should be one lane. But it's two. And there's buses on it. Fucking buses. And motorcycles. Assholes and motorcycles. Weaving in and out of cars. People in Italy drive like fucking maniacs. Like, you have never seen. We all know Italians are kind of crazy. I'm mostly Italian, and I know you're fucking crazy.
Do you have the left-hand steering wheel? Or
no.
Right? It's regular, like
regular.
Yeah. It's only left-hand in England and Japan, South Africa.
Yeah. Have you gotten in a car with a left hand?
Yes.
With a right hand?
Australia as well.
Australia.
What do you feel like?
It's fucking confusing as shit. You're like, where are we going? You're on the wrong side.
And if you never stick driving, it's even worse.
Oh yeah, because you have the shift with your left hand. Oh yeah, but you still the clutch is still on the left hand side, right? And the pedal's still on the right.
Still on the left.
Yeah, I think I'd adjust, but it would be the opposite version. Yeah, so this is what it's like on the Amalfi Coast. So you're driving on this road.
Sure.
This is what it's like. That's a 2-lane road, Joey. There's a fucking bus coming, and you got to figure out how to get a car past that bus. And we were going like, and I'm not exaggerating, a half of a mile an hour trying to get past cars and buses.
Absolutely.
It takes forever to get up there. It should take 10 minutes. That's the road. It should take 10 minutes. It takes 90. I'm not kidding. But once you get up to the top, like look at that picture where you're seeing the ocean, Jamie, like up in the right-hand corner, upper right-hand. Yeah, like there. That's what it looks like once you finally get up there. You're like, wow, it's so pretty. So pretty, man. Italy's amazing. The food's
great, huh?
out of this world. Fuck your gluten. You better all your gluten-free bullshit. You better let that go when you're in Italy.
So was there a
bitch.
lot of pasta in Italy?
Oh yeah.
People here say, "Nah, you go to Italy, it's nothing like that. That's Americanized.
What?
It's more fish and stuff. There's a lot of."
Well, they definitely eat a lot of fish.
No, do they still use gravy like red sauce? No.
Not so much.
Right.
Not so much. You can get it, though, and I think one of the reasons why you can get it is because probably people have come over there and wanted it, you know?
Do you remember that episode of The Sopranos and the guy ordered, he's like, I want gravy. And the one waiter looked at the other one and he goes, these East Coast Italians, they're as classless as the Germans because he ordered spaghetti with gravy.
Yeah.
That's not big over there.
Well, you say gravy, like people are like, what is he talking gravy? Like people think of like gray.
No,
like
it's
gravy
sauce,
with biscuits. Right? Yeah, it was spaghetti sauce.
Right.
Yeah, it's weird.
Like bolognese.
Yeah.
Bolognese, yeah.
They
I had
have
bolognese
that.
last night.
Yeah, you can get bolognese over there, but it's just the Americans that came over, they developed a different sort of style of eating. Like a lot of meatballs.
Yeah, like Alfredo, fettuccine Alfredo.
You don't like it?
No, I mean,
that's the shit you eat when you come here as an immigrant.
Right.
Like when I came from Cuba, like when you're a white kid, you eat, that's my daughter likes Alfredo. That's just gonna get cut off the menu in like a month.
But
you know, no Alfredo in my fucking world.
Why not Alfredo?
Because that's what people eat in Iowa. Like that's the first Italian they eat, like Alfredo.
Olive
They
Garden.
love it. You know, no. That's like a 1-month training thing. Like when I even had it out of a fucking jar. Like that's how Alfredo I was. Yeah, when I came from Cuba and I tasted Italian food, my mind blew up. You know, I was into all angles of it, but the red sauce was last. I fucking Alfredo with fucking those thick noodle sauce. That's what you give to a fucking horse.
I like it.
But when I moved,
Alfredo sauce with chicken and broccoli.
Oh no,
mushrooms. Come on, Jamie, is it good? Right? It's good.
You grow out of that. Man. I grew out of that. I was like,
it's not my first choice, but I like it.
No, I don't.
But I never heard about that since I moved here. When I moved here in 90, it was 92, 93. Everybody were asking me, do you like fettuccine Alfredo? I said, I don't even know where they are. And
That's
they said,
hilarious.
Yo, you're no Italian. I said, no, I'm from Italy. The passport say it.
You don't know Italian. That's like that's
crazy,
hilarious. Right? It's like going somewhere in another country and tell you
it's just here.
Cheeseburgers on American.
What are the meals? So you have bolognese, you have arrabbiata.
Yeah, there's a lot
you
of
have
things.
pasta fazool.
Pasta fagioli. Yeah, it's depends about the location that you
they
go.
Call
the
it,
north,
they
the south.
call it the real name, like pasta fagioli.
Pasta fagioli.
Yeah, they don't call it pasta fazool.
Well, that's New Jersey, pasta fazool. But then what's in the... Like, we can't get that stuff here in California. What's in
the
that?
gabagooch.
Not the gabagooch. The other one. The green stuff. The stuff that gets your dick hard.
The
pesto?
What?
I thought it was a blue one.
Like this. Dick hard?
What do you put in pasta fazool? You put beans and... The green stuff. It's not spinach.
The pistachio, the pesto? Pasta pesto?
No.
It's not spinach?
It's not. What do you... They call it's two things.
So you're talking about a type of vegetable?
Escarole and beans.
Oh, escarole.
That shit.
Escarole gets your dick hard?
Huh?
I think your dick was just getting hard.
Listen to me.
For a
Pasta fazool in the winter. You make that shit in November. Okay? You know, I ate pasta. When I first tasted it, I ate it every day for like 40 days.
Yeah.
Like when I first went to my friend's house, I went from 160 to 194. Just eating pasta fazool twice a day.
That sounds like the army. That's the only thing they were giving you.
Lifting weights and pasta fazool, you get yoked, Jack. It's like taking D-ball. You get yoked. Just pop those beans, that escarole, and that in the winter with all that garlic and stuff, you're off and running, brother.
They did have a lot of fish. Like, you had amazing
That's what
seafood.
we're talking about on the drive up.
The Amalfi Coast, they had amazing seafood. But the pasta was like a very light sauce. Like, you know how you get, like, if you went to a good place and got, like, linguine vongole, they'll give you a linguine with a very light olive oil and garlic sauce with the linguine, and, like, that is the kind of pasta. Like, it's a very much more delicate pasta.
Yeah, because you want to taste the fish.
Yeah.
You don't want to cover the flavor. Right?
Yeah. That's why if you try to go to a real Italian restaurant, you ask for cheese, like grated cheese on, like, linguine vongole, they'll look at you like you're a fucking monster. Like, who are you?
You're not going to put the cheese on the top of the fish.
Yeah, they'll say it's not recommend. Not recommend. They look at you like, don't do it. And you're like, no, come on, hit me with it. Like Kevin James and I used to always get linguine and clams, and he would get pissed if they didn't come over with the cheese. Like, where's the guy with the cheese? We gotta have the grated cheese. And he would try to put it on, like, at a good restaurant. They get upset with you. Yeah. They don't want you putting that cheese on it. If you have like spaghetti bolognese or something like that, they'll ask you, would you like some cheese? And then that makes sense. But they don't even come near you. They'll try to stay away from your side of the table if you got linguine with clams. They don't want to give it to you.
Yeah, even red wine with the fish.
They get mad.
Yeah, they get mad.
Yeah, they get mad. You're supposed to drink white wine with fish.
Really?
Yeah.
They get that upset with it?
I don't drink white wine.
I don't like dry white wine. I drink barley, but red wine is better than white for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll drink white, but I don't order it. Like, if somebody pours me a glass, I'm not going to be... it's not awful, but if I have a choice, it's always red. I like red. Red, to me, it's like it's got a flavor that's, like, compelling. It's interesting. It's alive. White wine is like chick drink. Sorry, girls.
I drank a fucking...
Sexist!
My mom used to have a bar, and she... At night, when we go home, when I was real young, like 4 or 5 in New York City, my mom would have a little glass of red wine. The wine with the fucking Italian paperwork on it that...
Oh, yeah.
You ever go to Michelli's and they hang them?
Yeah.
Like that shit. So I was maybe 4, maybe 5, and I would watch her. One night I watched her go to bed, and I said, fuck it. And I took that bottle of wine, I fucking drank the whole thing. She woke up like 6 hours later, couldn't find me. Called the police. I was missing.
You were drunk as fuck.
In the closet, shit, puked. I never drank wine again until about fucking 8 years ago. I would smell it and it still gets sick.
You get sick, huh? Oh, your brain remember.
She would tell me all the time, you'll never like wine because you got so hammered that time. We called the cops. We did everything. They couldn't fucking find you.
Alberto, what's your martial arts background?
I started with boxing, regular boxing. Then I found that time was like 82. Big things in Italy was full contact karate. I remember all those big names, Benny the Jet.
Benny the Jet Arquides.
All those guys.
Right out here, man. He's
I know. He's from here. Yeah.
I used to train in his gym when I first came here. When I first came to California.
Jerry Blank, right?
Yeah.
Jerry Blank was down in at the Palisade, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
All those guys were super
Blinky
food.
Rodriguez, he was out here as well. He's Benny's brother-in-law.
That's I started for that, and then Muay Thai came, and I fell in love with Muay Thai. And I fell in love. That was my big things.
Boy, that Muay Thai fucking changed everybody's eyes. As soon as you realize how hard it is to get kicked in the legs. You know, oh wait, what?
Yeah, and I was like everybody, never try. The first time I went to say, okay, it's gonna be nothing different. It's like being a roundhouse kick in the legs. And they hit me hard. I remember I couldn't walk for a couple of days.
Shins, man.
And then I fell in love. So like Muay Thai, started to compete in Muay Thai.
Yeah, karate style with the shin, where the instep rather, when you're kicking with the top of the foot. Everybody had this idea like that was the way to do it. And then the moment you get kicked with a shin, you go, oh.
Different music.
All right. That's...
And I got a lot of injury for kicking on the instep.
Oh, yeah.
On my ankle was...
Yeah, you get ankles devastated.
Couldn't run, so I need to recondition it on my foot, like we discussed in the beginning, right? So it's a shin kick change. And then during the past, for the security, I start to investigate different style. And the guy that changed my way to see things, transfer not to competition but to my line of duty, was a guy in Israel. But it's because he's been into 4 war. It's a real man. It's like become like a second father for me. But he always told me, it's the spirit. I don't care the way you punch, the way you kick, and say, until your mindset is not on point. It's not gonna be. You're not gonna be ready to do something for real. It's so that they can tell you, do karate, do jiu-jitsu, do that. But if your mindset, real things, when you go to war, you do. You need to apply these things for real. It's changing.
I think he's right, but he's also not right. Because I think he's right in the sense that your mindset must be correct in order for you to apply any sort of martial arts in actual competition.
Absolutely.
But it's always important to have the right technique.
Oh, yeah, no. I'm missing, maybe I'm saying. He was working already on. He never believed in the Krav Maga. He's an Israeli guy. He introduced the jiu-jitsu a lot. Introduced the jiu-jitsu, introduced the BJJ in his system, and introduced a lot of boxing and Muay Thai. So you need to have the full aspect of that. And then, of course, if you go into if you was training all the special forces there, the Secret Service, you need to have the right guy to doing that. Some people that are not ready to be a warrior.
Right.
They can train like a warrior, but not a warrior. So it's
Yeah, I can only imagine, especially like Krav Maga in the United States. There's legit Krav Maga schools in the United States for sure. There's really good instruction. There's really good people, but there's also a lot of fucking horse shit. Just like with karate, like there's a lot of mall karate where you go to these places and it might be fine for little kids. They're learning little martial arts, learning little discipline. They have goals. You know, I want to get my orange belt, and they get it and they get excited, and it's good for them. It's good for their mind. But it's really critical when you're learning a martial art. One of the most important things is find a legitimate instructor.
Right.
It's the most important thing because relearning things is so hard. Back when I was teaching, when I taught someone if they didn't know anything, they came to me with no martial arts experience. It was so much easier than if someone came to me with bad martial arts experience. Because if you have if you took karate for a few years from some bozo and you did everything all wrong, I would have to reteach you. So when you would panic, if you would get nervous, you would go right back to that old way. Like as soon as someone puts pressure on you, you would go right back to the old shitty technique.
That's exactly what. It's all about what is the learning and the movement database is in your brain is the same position. So whatever you achieve, you put in the database is wrong. It's gonna under stress. It's gonna repeat the same things.
That's for everything, man.
Everything.
Even for pool. Like there's certain techniques that people learn where they don't learn how to do pool correctly. You're only playing billiards. You stand the wrong way and you get used to it. And when you're in a match and there's a lot on the line, you go right back to the old ways. Even if you take lessons. Like it's so important that when you learn things in life, to learn them right the first time. That's why when you're growing up as a human being, I think it's been an issue with me. I think it's been an issue with you as well. When your childhood is kind of fucking crazy, like you develop these ways of thinking and acting as a child that are very difficult to break. As you get older and you get as an adult, it's like you have this foundation that's very faulty, and you have to be cognizantly aware. You have to be consciously aware of that. Okay, this foundation is fucked up because I grew up with domestic violence and I grew up with no dad, and so I have to make sure that I don't fall into these patterns that I had established in my head when I was 8, 9, and 10, and 11. As you're growing up as an adult, this is the way you're looking at life, and then you have to kind of restructure it. It's almost like you're starting over. But if you meet someone who has like a great father and a great mother, and they grow up and they have like a great fundamental balance, like those people used to always make me nervous when I was a kid. Because I was always like, God, like these, I don't even know anybody like that. Like I would feel like inferior to them. Like when I was around people that had like a good childhood, I would feel inferior.
I still do.
Do you?
Sure. I feel weird. If I have friends that I think about them now and I go, I want to really interview their parents. Like, what did they do to get this kid to be such fucking? What was their recipe to get this child to be fucking a superhuman being? And I'm not talking about, Julius Erving's father or fucking GSP's dad. I'm talking about people who you meet in life that are really fair, that are really kind. I look at those people and I go, I wondered what their parents did with them, like to have that ability to want to help people and go out of their way. I always think about that shit, especially now as a parent. You're like, what is the fucking chemistry of love for them to understand? We were talking on the way up here when my mother died. It was the 70s. And let's face it, we were still spics in that New Jersey neighborhood. In Boston and those areas, you hear things. But I remember those Italian kids coming to my mom's wake, and they couldn't make eye contact with me. The same ones that would say spick or whatever, because I short-circuited them. I broke them. because the number one word in Italy is mama.
Right.
That's it. That's it. When you're Italian, everything is mama. They would come to that wake, and I would short-circuit them because they never could think of that situation happening to them. And I'm still friends with those people today. And I always wondered why, who raised them, that they're super great people. And then you come here to a place like California, and you meet people, and they have nice parents or whatever, but they're just the biggest scumbags in the fucking world. Do you follow? Yeah, that's what interests me in my life.
I always feel like those people, the parents probably weren't around that much.
Or
like they might be really nice people, but they weren't around to really install the right ideals and values and morals in their system. Maybe the parents were off at fucking swinger parties or some shit.
I always look at that, with even the kids I grew up with. Like I have a friend that his dad was little, but his mother was solid.
Right.
And
when you say his dad was a little, you mean gay?
He'll put a bullet in your fucking eyeball at
put
lunch.
A bullet in your eyeball?
At lunch. I mean, when I would hang out with him, people's parents would come to me and go, I wouldn't be going over there if I was you.
Really?
Did you see the article on his dad? Yeah.
Oh, he's a psycho?
No. He was...
crazy?
Just a street guy.
Oh, okay.
And... today, the kid is one of my best friends. Never had a problem, never had a law problem, no record, never ticket, married, children.
Well,
school.
There's people that grow up with horrible environments and they come out amazing, and then their brothers and sisters are all in jail. It's weird how a person makes choices in their life that really establishes their entire life. And a lot of those choices, man, I hate to say it, but it could be luck. They could have made a lucky choice early on, and that lucky choice led them down a better road than someone who's made a poor choice. Like kids that get involved in the juvenile detention system when they're really young, boy, that fucks them up so hard.
The percentages are horrible. The percentages are horrible.
And a good friends can, good people around you,
yes.
and can tell you the right things, even if it's hard.
Yeah.
When he's telling you the truth, and it sounds like a smack behind the head, but make you open your eyes, make you say, you know what, I might be changing.
Once you put a kid in one of those gladiator prisons, the percentages, it's like we were just talking about that movie that came out, Sleepers.
Yeah.
All 4 of them went away. 2 of them came out to become Westies. The other 2 came out to be decent. The percentages, it's 50%.
Yeah.
And that's on the conservative side.
Right.
It's got to be higher. Once you get that first tattoo and smoke that first cigarette, all those things, your percentages go deeper and deeper.
Yep.
Once you get the tattoo knuckles that say fuck, you're doomed. Mike Tyson got the face tattoo at 40.
Yeah.
Everything had already, all the bad stuff out of his life had already come true. But if Mike Tyson would have came with that face tattoo at 18, it's so weird, like how I saw it. I saw people in the bottom that today they're successful and the police records don't matter or nothing matters.
Yeah.
And then I saw other people who were like sneaky people, who now they're in trouble for tax evasion. You know what I'm saying? Like there's always...
Yeah.
My mother was a big thing for me. Like you say, mama is a bit important. My mother, she always told me, give more that you want to receive, give double, and then it also told me, like be, straight to people, don't fool around yourself, so you're not gonna fool around people. And I believe that thing,
Yeah, it also helps if you know people that work hard.
Right.
When I was a kid, my best friends had jobs. They worked hard. They were constantly working. They were always working.
At a young age?
Yeah, my friend Jimmy DiTilio and Jimmy Lawless. I'm still buddies with them to this day. But we were in high school. Those fucking guys always worked.
In high school?
Yeah, in high school.
Yeah, and worked.
Always worked. Had construction jobs. Always worked. I had construction jobs, too, because my dad was architect. My stepdad always set me up with these construction crews and stuff, so I did these jobs that were... And so it gave me the understanding that you, like if you've never worked hard and you don't know what the fuck hard work is, then all of a sudden you're 18 and then you're in college and then you got out of college, then you have to get a job. You have no real experience with actual difficult work. I just don't think you appreciate what it takes to get by. And growing up, seeing people that had a strong work ethic and realizing that wasn't something that I had, but maybe it was something that I need to consider as being like a very important skill, a very important trait. The ability to like just actually get shit done. To get up in the morning when your alarm clock goes off and go. You're uncomfortable. You want to stay in bed. It's cold out. You don't want to do it. That ability to just do it, just get up and do it. You know that old Nike fucking slogan, just do it?
Just do it.
It's one of the best fucking slogans of all time. You know how many people actually went out and worked out just because of that just do it? That might have been like the most effective ad campaign in the history of ad campaigns when it came to actually getting people to do things that are uncomfortable and something that actually made sense. Just do it. It's so important. It's so important. You just got to fucking get things done. And for so many people, like you were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, Joey, that book, The War of Art, where it talks about resistance. There's so many people that just fuck off. They fuck off, and they don't get the things done that they need to get done, and that haunts them. We know it as comics. We know so many guys that don't write new material. They just don't. They just don't. They don't work. They don't work. You know why? Because when you have new material, man, sometimes it doesn't go well. Sometimes you bomb. Sometimes you go up and it's clunky. It's not ready. And when you do a special, like when you just released a special, you know what it's like. That material's dead now. And so now you have to write all new material, and you have a bunch of people that are coming to pay to see you.
Oh, my God, it's hell.
Oh, you're panicking.
It's hell.
And
I'm
the
panicking.
shows
I panic
aren't always
every
good.
week.
Yeah.
I panic every fucking week. Every week when I go on the road, I panic because I do not have a full 50 minutes that's new. I got a couple fucking minutes, and I'm trying out new shit constantly. And
it comes together, slowly but surely.
Together. But it's just like anything else. It's sticking with it. Right now, I'm in a slump. So what do you do as a baseball player? Jamie, when you're in a slump, what do you do as a baseball player? You quit? No. You keep fucking hitting. And you keep striking out. You keep fucking striking out. And you keep it together. You cannot lose it. IKA Tony Perez, 1976-75 against the Boston Red Sox. He went 0 for 17 in the series, and in Game 7, he hit the single that changed. They won the World Series, really. So he could have just said, I don't want to do it. I know I'm in a comedian slump. Well, not anymore now, but like in December and January, it was fucking heavy, Jack. But you just got to work yourself through it.
Yeah, there's no other way.
Just get yourself through it. It's the weirdest
thing. There's no other way.
You know what? And for me, I could lie to you and say, well, I'm not going to get on stage. I'm going to stay home and write for the next 3 months.
That's not good enough.
Wrong answer, Jack. That's not going to work.
It's not good enough.
You got to keep going to the well. Like, right now I have a problem. You know, last year, I have such a fear of being on my back in jiu-jitsu that it fucking made me, I will not quit. I will not quit. Because what happens if I'm with Joe, I'm with my family one day, and I get kicked in the stomach, and I'm on my back? Am I going to panic? So I cannot fucking quit. So I kept going back to jiu-jitsu. But the weird thing was I was doing it wrong. Even though I was putting in the mat time, I wasn't working on my breathing. I thought that by me going 3 times a week and doing what a fighter does, stay in that fighting 3 times a year, that my breathing would come together. Absolutely. It would come together, but in little... Not good delivery. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the time I'd put in for what I get back wasn't rewarding enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would think of going,
you needed a different approach.
So, and then I started doing those little things with Alberto in the back when I get there, the breathing. You know what, man? I'm a big boy. You don't have to tell me dick. I know I got something wrong with the back of my head with that fear shit. And it's with the needles. And what did I do with the needles, dog? I could faint. I faint walking into a doctor's office. I could smell cotton. I can't smell shit. I could smell fucking cotton when I walk into a doctor's office. Yeah. I could smell that light.
Because it associates with fear.
Yeah, exactly.
Tremendous. When I walk into a doctor's office, my blood pressure is 190 over 160, dog. They look at me and go, how are you walking? I go, take a hike. Come back in 10 minutes. And once my doctor comes back and he starts talking to me and we talk about Chicago and hot beef sandwiches, he goes, watch this. And it's 140 over 80.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I know. I lived through this.
It's all about, for me, when I train people, you know, I try to say, okay, you're doing 10 push-up, and if you come to the 8, the number 8, and you see that you start to struggle, that's it. Stop. I don't allow you to do a bad number, number 9, because I know number 9 is going to be a bad push-up, so a bad form. So what happens when you're going to be under stress? You're going to be repeating the bad form. So for me, it's a concept. I try to remap you, like you said before when you were teaching, remap you in the way that you always try to achieve the best. So like you say, just do it. What I say, okay, you need to repeat the things until you never do it wrong. Don't do it right. You never do it wrong. Because do it right once, it can come from luckiness.
Right.
It's a lucky shot. I want you to learn how to do it right every single time. And that's when we can step forward to a next level.
Do you subscribe to that Pavel Tatsulini? You know, he's got that strong first
I love it.
ideology where you don't do to failure ever. Yeah. I do that now. That's how I do all my work. I don't lift to failure ever. Like, say if I could do 10 reps of something, I do 5.
Good.
And then I wait like 10 minutes and then I do another 5. Then I'll wait 10 minutes, I'll do another 5. Then I'll wait 10 minutes, I'll do another 5. And the idea being that it's more important to do more workouts in the week with low repetition than it is to do a high repetition workout. Like, you know, where that guy's like, come on, spot me, last one. That's not good. Your body's not designed to do that. Your body's not designed to be at failure ever. So what you're supposed to do is build yourself up. So you're doing these exercises, and he says that you should think of them as a skill, that strength is a skill. So each exercise you're doing, you don't want to be tired when you're doing a skill. You don't want to be completely exhausted when you're trying to pull back a bow and arrow or shoot a pool game or shoot a ball in pool. What you want to do is you want to have that cemented in your mind, and what he calls greasing the groove. Like each time you do it perfect, you do it with perfect form, and you just do low repetitions with heavy weights.
Absolutely. You know, Pavel and Strong First, I believe, is another amazing school.
Yes.
School of strength. And one of my coach of strength conditioning is from that. So,
yeah.
And yeah, that's what I'm doing for myself, even because of those flight, you know, my jet lag, my CNS, my nervous system is already.
Yeah.
What I do when I train, maybe every 4 weeks I try to do 1 or 2 reps and 95%. I never try to do a personal record. I always like to work like 85%, few reps. So even psychologically, I know that I can end at a good form at that level, never gonna stress out, you know. And
for people who are interested in this, go to Pavel there's a lot of stuff online, but I think some of the best stuff online is him on the Tim Ferriss podcast. Really excellent stuff, and he.
All right, everybody, we're reaching about 4 hours, so I'm gonna call it quits for about an hour. Get something to eat, get something to drink, rest my eyes and my brain matter and my head movies, and yeah, I think let me know what you think about this arm. You know, we have this one. Let me get that mechanical arm and save it really quick. Nope, not that one. Alrighty, so let's get over here. Okay, so we got that one. Let me save this. Okay. One. So we got this one, more round, right? Get this one, or we got this one. This one seems more mean to me. Seems more edgy. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. But yeah, I think I'm going to accomplish everything else. I'm going to fix this right here, and then I'm going to send it off over to, like, everything else that I'm going to do to this will be in Substance Painter. Probably going to do a couple hoses here and there, maybe one in the back, and then have like a oil can or something like that. I don't know. But we will see in the next 4 hours. But let's see what we wanted to get done. Wanted to get... Okay. So we modeled some pistons. We did, you know, kind of finalize the arm design. We didn't retop the shoulder and arm, but we can do that in the next section. And what I mean by that is this area, because I want it to be completely separate from the rest of his body, right? So I want to go over this in with my topology brush and model out all these parts and really cut into here and do all this good stuff. Also, it's going to cut down on the overall topology count because I want to keep this under 100,000. And if I can go through here and remodel a bunch of stuff, then it will definitely cut down. Instead of having, you know, millions and billions of polys, it'll probably have like, you know, 20,000 or something like that. So that'll help as well. So that's what I'll be doing. And then after that, we'll be going into skin detail. We'll be fixing his teeth. And by that, I mean fucking them up. We'll go, and then we'll retopologize his head as well. And see how that goes. And there's also a couple things I want to do in terms of these buttons here and all that stuff. So we'll finalize some of the things on the side of his head. That one's pretty cool. I'm down with that one. Need to have something here that, and we'll do that in the retopology. We'll just leave this area here for me to just sketch some digi type stuff and then carry it down his spinal cord, and just make sure that I have the same consistency. Like, you know, the mechanical stuff should look like this, right? So whenever I separate all this and subdivide it, I'm going to mark in a bunch of lines that will support this design scheme, you know, and also that will carry over into the back as well, into the spine and over here into the side of his shoulder as well. And then put him on a base of some sort. It'll probably just be a Dynamesh thing that I'll, because, you know, I'm not going to worry about that being game ready. I'm just going to worry about him being game ready and call it a day after that. But yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Lordy. Appreciate the compliment. And again, I'll be back probably about an hour and a half. I'm going to get something to eat and relax a bit and then come back. And thank you so much for all the encouragement and all the love. I do greatly appreciate it. It's nice to be working and then look over and see that support from all of my friends and followers, and just see it's great. Thank you so much. I don't want to get emotional, but I do appreciate it. And I hope you all have a good night, and I'll see you soon.